Welcome to Potter Eclipse, today's adventure. What if Narcissa Malfoy discovered Harry's abuse and raised him as Draco's brother? If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now let's begin. Chapter 1, The Discovery. The lowest hall of Gringotts smelled of cold iron and older money, and Narcissa Malfoy walked through it as though she owned the floor she had been permitted to cross. She had come on house business, which was the only kind of business a Black conducted in person. The ledgers of the Black estate were vast and patient things, and once a decade or so they required a hand that could not be delegated. Lucius had offered to send a clerk. She had declined. A clerk could read numbers. A clerk could not feel the place where numbers had been made to lie. The goblin who received her was named Sharptooth, and he had managed Black accounts since before her grandfather's death. He was courteous in the manner that meant nothing and missed nothing, and he laid the estate rolls before her with the air of a man presenting a sword he expected her to know how to hold. She read for an hour without speaking. The vaults of her birth house had bled a little over the years, as old houses did, but the bleeding was orderly. She turned the heavy pages and let the figures settle into shape, and the shape was sound, and she was nearly finished when her eye caught on a line that should not have been there at all. It was a marginal entry, a cross-reference, the sort of notation that linked one ledger to another where blood tied two houses together. The Black estate touched a great many houses. That was rather the point of being a Black, but this reference reached toward a vault she had not expected, and the name beside it stopped her hand on the page. Potter. Sharptooth, she said, explain this to me. The goblin leaned, looked, and made a sound low in his throat that she had learned over 30 years to read as the goblin equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Kinship line, he said. Your house and the house of Potter are joined through Doria Black, who married Charles Potter. The estates share a courtesy reference. It is dormant. It signifies nothing requiring action. It signifies an action that was taken. She set one lacquered nail beside the entry. There is a withdrawal noted here against a Potter trust, rooted through a guardian of record. The Black ledger sees it because the kinship reference is open. Why is the kinship reference open? Sharptooth was quiet a moment longer than a goblin was ever quiet for nothing. Because, he said, the house of Potter has no living magical guardian who has claimed its rights. When a noble house falls dormant and its heir is a minor, the nearest kindred house retains a watching interest under old contract. Your house holds the watching interest over Potter. It has held it since the 1st of November 1981. No Black has ever looked at it. She had not looked at it. None of them had. The night the Potters died had been a night her family spent on the wrong side of a war, and the boy who survived it had become, in every drawing room she frequented, a name one did not say with affection. She had given the matter precisely as much thought as the rest of her circle. The Dark Lord was gone, the Potter brat was somewhere, and the world had rearranged itself around the absence of the man her sister had worshipped. She looked now. Read me the guardian withdrawals, she said. All of them, by year, Sharptooth read. The Potter trust was a respectable thing, not a great fortune but a comfortable one, and it had been settled by James Potter's grandfather to provide for an heir's keeping, schooling, and clothing until majority. A guardian of record could draw against it for the child's maintenance. The withdrawals were small and regular, and they had a guardian's name attached, Vernon Dursley, of Little Winging, Surrey. She listened to 5 years of figures, and somewhere in the third year she understood that what she was hearing was a story, and that the story was wrong. Stop, she said. How many withdrawals for clothing? None. For schooling? None. For a healer? For anything a child requires? None, madam. Sharptooth turned the roll toward her so she could see the column herself. The guardian draws a flat maintenance allowance quarterly, the maximum permitted without itemization. He has drawn it every quarter for 5 years. He has itemized nothing, because itemization would require a Gringotts notary to confirm the goods were purchased for the ward. He has never confirmed a single purchase for the ward. The hall was very cold. She was aware of it as a fact about the room and not about herself. A man, she said slowly, has drawn the maximum sum permitted every quarter for 5 years, and has bought the child it was meant for nothing at all. That is what the ledger says. The ledger does not say what was bought outside the trust. No, Sharptooth folded his long hands. The ledger says only what passes through us. I would not presume, madam, to tell a Black what to conclude from her own accounts. It was the most a goblin would ever say, and it was a great deal. She sat with the open roll under her hand and felt something move in her that she did not have a comfortable name for. It was not sentiment. She distrusted sentiment the way she distrusted unsigned contracts. It was closer to the thing she felt when she found a snare set in her own gardens, a wrongness with teeth in it, an offense against the order of how things were meant to be kept. Potter was kin, distant, inconvenient, on the wrong side of a great deal, but kin by Doria Black, who had been her own father's aunt, and a woman of whom the family had quietly approved even when it disapproved of where she had married. The boy carried Black blood, and a man with no blood at all had been emptying the boy's birthright into his own pocket and giving him, by the look of these figures, nothing in return. She had come to read numbers. She had not expected the numbers to be a child. I will need the watching interest contract drawn out in full, she said, and her voice had gone to the register that ended discussions. With every right it grants the House of Black named on the parchment. Today, Sharptooth, before I leave this floor. Sharptooth brought it himself, which was its own statement, and unrolled 3 feet of contract law that predated the statute of secrecy. She read it the way she read everything, looking first for the teeth. They were there. The watching interest was not a courtesy after all. It was a weapon that no one had thought to pick up. Tell me if I have understood it, she said. The House of Black holds a standing claim of guardianship over any minor heir of a kindred house gone dormant, superior to any guardianship arranged by parties of lesser or no blood relation. It sleeps until invoked. Once invoked by the head of the house or by the head's lawful proxy, it cannot be set aside by ministry decree, by testamentary instruction, or by any guardianship established after the fact, because it predates all 3 and was written into the foundations the ministry itself stands on. You have understood it precisely. Sharptooth's mouth moved in what might have been respect or might have been hunger. With goblins, the two were not always distinct. I will add only what the parchment implies and does not say. A guardianship arranged after the fact, say, by a wizard of standing, placing a child where he wished the child to be, would have been arranged in the belief that no kindred house would ever invoke a sleeping claim. Such arrangements are robust against everything except the one thing their architects assumed would never wake, and if it wakes, then the later arrangement was never lawful at all. It was a trespass dressed as a guardianship, and the trespass ends the moment the true claim is spoken. He let that settle. I observe, madam, that you have not yet asked whether the claim is yours to invoke. You are not the head of House Black. My cousin Sirius is the head of House Black, and he is in Azkaban, unable to invoke anything. She rolled the contract closed. But the line of succession does not stop at a prison wall. With the head incapable, the senior daughter of the house in good standing may act as lawful proxy in matters touching the blood. I am that daughter. Bellatrix is incarcerated, and Andromeda is struck from the tree. That leaves me. She permitted herself nothing that could be called a smile, but something passed behind her eyes that the goblin who had watched blacks for 2 centuries recognized. Draw it from my hand, Sharptooth, notarized, sealed, witnessed by Gringotts. I will have it ready before I need it, because I have learned that the people who lose are the people who go to fetch their weapon after the fight has started. It will be ready within the hour. I have time, said Narcissa Malfoy, who had cleared her afternoon for ledgers and would now clear her year for something else, that I did not know I had until an hour ago. Little Winging was the kind of place that had been designed by someone who feared imagination, and it had succeeded. She did not arrive in a manner that would be remembered. A black who wished to be unseen was unseen. She walked onto Privet Drive in a plain traveling coat under a notice-me-not that turned every passing eye gently elsewhere, and she stood across from number 4 in the white July glare and watched. The house was identical to its neighbors, which she supposed was the point of it. Clipped lawn, a car polished to hardness, net curtains drawn against the very idea of being looked into. Yet expected squalor, perhaps, some honest poverty that might at least explain a man taking what was not his. There was none. This was a house with money in it. Whatever the Potter Trust had bought it here for these people, and not for the child whose name was on the account. She had been watching for the better part of an hour, and her certainty had begun to harden into something she would have to do something about, when the front door opened and a boy came out into the heat. He was small. That was the first wrong thing, and she catalogued it before the rest. 6 years was not large in any child, but this boy was small the way a plant grown in a cupboard is small, drawn thin and reaching. His clothes were a man's cast-off, cinched and rolled, gray where they had once been some color, and they hung on him like a flag on a still day. He carried a trowel and a flat tin, and he went to the flower bed beneath the front window and knelt to it without being told, and began to weed in the full sun with the air of a creature performing a task it had performed 1,000 times and would be punished for performing wrongly. Narcissa stood across the road and did not move. The boy worked. A bead of sweat ran down his temple, and he did not wipe it. He had learned, evidently, not to interrupt the task with his own comfort. His hands were quick and competent and far too thin, and then a voice came from inside the house, a man's voice, thick and impatient, and don't you dare miss a single one, boy, I'll be checking, and the child's whole body changed. It was not a flinch exactly. A flinch is a single thing. This was a practice contraction, a folding down of a body that had learned to make itself smaller at the sound of a particular register of voice, and it happened all at once and passed all at once, and the boy bent back to the weeds with his shoulders an inch lower than they had been. He had not been struck, he had only been spoken to, and his body had answered as bodies answer the memory of being struck. Narcissa Malfoy had been raised in a house that did not believe in flinching. Cygnus Black had not been a gentle father, and the lessons of that house had been delivered without apology. She knew in her own body the difference between a child who has been disciplined and a child who has been broken to a sound. She was looking at the second thing. She had been the second thing once for a season before she learned to be ice instead. The child lifted his head, perhaps he felt the weight of being watched. Children sometimes did, and for one moment he looked across the road at the place where she stood unseen, and she saw his eyes. They were green, not the muddy hazel of half the country. Green the color of new beech leaves with the light behind them, a green the wizarding world had spent a great many drawing-room evenings describing, because it was the one feature every account of the Potters agreed upon. Lily Evans had owned those eyes. Her son had them now in a thin gray face above a man's collar, in the front garden of a house that had stolen from him and starved him and taught him to fold down at the sound of a voice. Something in Narcissa's chest that she had spent 40 years keeping cold went, without her permission, very hot. She did not cross the road. She wanted to. She registered the want, examined it, found it sincere and useless, and she did not. A want acted on in the wrong moment was a want wasted. If she walked over now, she would have a scene and a ministry inquiry and a screaming muggle and a frightened child and no custody, and the boy would be back in that garden by autumn while solicitors argued. She had not become the most dangerous woman in 3 drawing rooms by acting on the first hot thing she felt. So she watched and she gathered, as she had told Sharptooth she would. She watched the man come out, Vernon Dursley, who was exactly as large as his car was hard and wore his temper on a face the color of corned beef, and inspect the flower bed with the gravity of a general reviewing troops, and find a weed the boy had missed and take the child by the upper arm to point it out. He did not strike him. He gripped and he leaned down into the boy's face, and the boy went still as a small animal goes still, and the man's fingers left white marks that went red when he let go. Then the man told the child to go and start the lunch and not to burn it this time, and the child went into the house at a half-run that was not eagerness. She watched a heavy woman with a long neck come to the window and look out at her own front garden with an expression of perfect contentment, a woman entirely at ease in a house where a 6-year-old did the weeding and the cooking and folded down at her husband's voice. And she watched because she had learned to confirm the worst rather than assume it. The boy reappear at a low window at the side of the house, a vent, a slat, the sort of grill that ventilated a cupboard under the stairs, and she understood, from the angle and the size of it and the thin mattress shape she could just make out behind the slats, where the child slept. She might have left then. She had her confirmation. The rest was only the body's reluctance to turn from a thing it had decided to fix. But she stayed 1 minute more, and the minute gave her something she had not come for. Vernon had gone back inside. The boy, sent to start the lunch, had paused at the doorstep to set down his tin of pulled weeds, and as he bent to it, the man's voice came again through the open window, sharper now, complaining of the heat, of the boy, of the cost of him, and the child's hands clenched on the tin's rim, and the tin moved. It did not fall, it lifted. For the breadth of a heartbeat, the flat metal tin rose 3 inches off the step and hung in the still air with nothing beneath it, and the boy stared at it with an expression that was not wonder but fear, the particular fear of a child who has learned that the strange things which happen around him are blamed on him and punished. Then his fear caught up to the magic and crushed it, and the tin dropped, and he snatched it up and glanced over both shoulders to see whether anyone had witnessed the wrongness of him. Narcissa had witnessed it, and what she had witnessed was not wrongness. It was a 6-year-old performing wandless levitation under emotional load, untaught, unwanted, and entirely unaware that what frightened him was the single most coveted quality a magical child could possess. The Dursleys had a thoroughbred in their cupboard and had spent 5 years beating it for being a horse. She had seen enough. She had in truth seen enough within the first 10 minutes. The rest had been her giving the Dursleys every chance to be merely unkind rather than monstrous, and they had declined the chance with a thoroughness that was almost admirable. Narcissa turned and walked back the way she had come, and her face under the notice-me-not was perfectly composed, and her mind had already left Surrey behind and gone to the only place it was now going to go. A black did not leave a child of kin in a cage. She had not chosen to care. She wanted that understood, even if only by herself. She had not gone to Surrey to find a son. She had gone to read a ledger. But the world had put a starved boy with Lily Evans's eyes in front of her and dared her to keep walking, and she discovered, somewhere on the apparition between Surrey and Wiltshire, that she was not the woman who could keep walking. She had thought she was. It was, in its way, the most surprising thing anyone had told her about herself in 20 years, and a child in a man's grey jumper had told her without saying a word. Malfoy Manor received her as it received everything, with cold marble and colder taste, and Lucius was in the long drawing-room with a glass of something amber and a letter he set down when he saw her face. "You were at Gringotts until noon," he said. "It is past 5. You look as though someone has died, and I should very much like to be told it is no one we are obliged to mourn. No one has died." She drew off her gloves finger by finger and set them on the mantel. "Though it is a near thing, and the someone is 6 years old." He waited. Lucius's patience was the patience of a man who had learned that information, allowed to arrive on its own, arrived more completely. She gave it to him plainly because plainness was the only thing that had ever moved him. The ledger, the kinship reference, the watching interest the House of Black had held over Potter since the night the Dark Lord fell. The 5 years of withdrawals, the garden, the grip, the cupboard, the green eyes. She watched the calculation move behind his pale face as she spoke, and she knew her husband well enough to follow it. The boy, the name, the Dark Lord, the optics, the risk. Lucius did not arrive at cruelty out of malice. He arrived at it out of arithmetic, which she had always found more frightening because arithmetic could not be shamed. "No," he said when she had finished. "I have not yet asked you for anything. You have asked me with your entire bearing, and the answer is no." He set the glass down with a click. "Narcissa, I will say this once, and I will say it as a man who is fond of you, which I am more than is fashionable. That child is the most dangerous object in Britain. He is the boy who unmade the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord is not dead. You know what I know. You have felt the mark stir. He will return, and when he returns, he will want to know what every man and woman who served him did with their hands while he was gone. And you propose that I bring his nemesis into my home and feed him at my table and call him kin. You propose to hang my son's future and yours and mine on the goodwill of a creature whose entire legend is the destruction of the man we are waiting to see again. I propose," she said, "to invoke a contract my house has held for 5 years and never used. You propose to make us a target for everyone. The Dark's faithful will see treachery. The Ministry will see a Death Eater family seizing the symbol of the light." "Dumbledore," he said, the name like a stone dropped down a well. "Dumbledore placed that boy where he is. I would stake the manor on it, and Dumbledore does not place things by accident. You would be reaching into Albus Dumbledore's own arrangement and pulling out the one piece he cares about. He will come for it. Let him come, Narcissa. You have given me the danger," she said. "Now I will give you the arithmetic, because I know it is the only language in which you will actually hear me." She crossed to the window so that the failing light was behind her and he had to look into it to look at her. "You say he is the most dangerous object in Britain. You are correct. You have only mistaken whose danger it is. Think, Lucius, the boy who lived is going to grow up. He's going to walk into the wizarding world at 11 years old as the single most important name of our generation, and every faction in Britain is going to want him, and exactly one of them is going to have spent his childhood feeding him, schooling him, and teaching him whom to trust. The question is not whether it is dangerous to raise Harry Potter. The question is who raises him and whether it is us or someone who will turn him against us." Lucius was very still. "Dumbledore put him with muggles who starve him," she went on, "because a starved child is a grateful child, and a grateful child believes whatever his rescuer tells him, and Dumbledore intends to be the rescuer. That is the arrangement you are afraid to reach into. I am proposing that we reach into it first. I am proposing that the boy who unmade the Dark Lord grow up loving our son like a brother and trusting your judgment and owing his whole rescued life to the House of Malfoy. You are frightened that he will be a weapon pointed at us. I am telling you that he is going to be a weapon regardless, and the only choice on the board is who holds the hilt." The amber light moved in the abandoned glass. Somewhere above them, faintly, a child's voice, their own child's, called for someone, was answered by a house elf and went quiet. "You have thought about this for an afternoon," Lucius said at last. "I have thought about it for an afternoon. You have failed to think about it at all, because the moment you heard the boy's name you stopped doing arithmetic and started doing fear, and you taught me long ago that the two are not the same and that fear is the more expensive of them." She let that sit. "I am not asking your permission. The watching interest belongs to my house, not yours. I can invoke it whether you stand beside me or behind me, but I would rather you saw what I see. You are very good, Lucius, at recognizing an asset. Look again and tell me you do not see one." He looked at her for a long moment, and she watched the fear go out of his face by degrees and the arithmetic come back, and she knew she had him, not because she had moved his heart, for Lucius's heart was a well-appointed room he rarely entered, but because she had reframed the danger as an opportunity, and an opportunity was the one thing her husband could not bear to leave on another man's table. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we do it correctly. The law, the right, the witnesses, nothing Dumbledore can unpick, nothing the Ministry can challenge. If the boy comes into this house, he comes as a ward whose claim is older and deeper than anything Albus Dumbledore can produce, or he does not come at all, because a half-made claim is worse than none. I had already concluded that. Gringotts is drawing the proxy now. And the optics with the faithful are managed by the truth, which is that a black reclaimed a child of black blood from thieving muggles, as any pure blood of honor would. We are not rescuing the light's symbol. We are correcting a theft against our own line. Let them gossip. They will find they cannot argue with blood because they have spent their whole lives insisting that blood is the only argument there is." She permitted herself, for the first time since Surrey, something near a smile. "We will hoist them on their own creed." Lucius exhaled and reached for the bell-pull, and she knew the shape of the evening had changed. "You will want Severus," he said. "I will want Severus tonight. He can read a Gringotts record and a healer's signs both, and I want the abuse documented by a hand the Ministry respects before we move, so that no one can ever say we invented a cruelty to justify a seizure. And I want his counsel on Dumbledore, which he is uniquely placed to give and uniquely reluctant to, which is precisely why I trust it. She retrieved her gloves from the mantel. Send for him. Tell him it concerns a child in the law. Tell him nothing else. I want to watch his face when he hears the name. Why? Because Severus Snape has a face that lies to everyone except me, said Narcissa, and there is a thing about that boy that Severus knows and has never said, and I should like to know what it is before I make Lily Evans's son a Malfoy. Lucius's hand paused on the bell pull. You think there is more here than a ledger and a cupboard. I think, she said, that nothing involving Albus Dumbledore is ever only what it appears, and that a man does not hide a child of prophecy with cruel muggles for the child's protection. He hides him there for the child's shaping. I intend to do the shaping instead. She drew the door open, and the cold air of the corridor came in like a decision. Ring for Severus, and have a room made up in the east wing, the one beside Draco's, aired, warmed, a fire lit. The child has been cold for 5 years. He will not be cold in this house. She went out before her husband could answer, and the manor closed its marble around her, and beneath the arithmetic and the strategy and the cold she wore like a second coat. The hot thing she had felt across the road in Surrey had not cooled at all. It had learned patience. It had become a plan. She found her son in the nursery wing, on the floor of the playroom, holding court over an army of enchanted tin soldiers that marched and fell and stood again at his command. Draco was 6, fair as his father, and entirely certain of the world, which was the great luxury of his age and his blood. He looked up when she came in, and his face brightened before he had decided to let it, and she went and sat on the low couch and let him show her the battle he was winning. They keep getting up, he complained of the soldiers. I knocked this one down 4 times, because they were made to get up. A soldier that stays down is no use to anyone. I want ones that stay down when I win. Then you have not yet won, said Narcissa. You have only knocked them over, and there is a great difference, which you will understand when you are older, and I am too tired to explain it. She watched him scowl at the philosophy and return to his war, and she thought of the other 6-year-old, the one in the gray jumper who had never in his life owned a single toy, let alone an army. Draco. He looked up. If you had a brother, if there were another boy in this house, near your age, what would you think of that? His scowl deepened to the full theatrical darkness only a much-loved child can produce. I don't want a brother. Brothers take your things, do they? Theodore Nott has a cousin who took his broom. Then Theodore Nott's cousin is a thief, and that is a fact about the cousin and not about brothers. She reached down and set one of his fallen soldiers upright, and it saluted her. A brother is not someone who takes your things, Draco. A brother is the one person in the world who will stand at your back when everyone else has decided to be your enemy. You do not understand the value of that yet. You have never had an enemy. But you will, because we are who we are, and on the day you have 100 of them, you will want one person beside you who is yours and whom no one can buy. That is a brother. It is the most expensive thing a house can own, and most houses never manage it at all. Draco considered this with the gravity he brought to all of his serious considerations, which was considerable. Would he have to share my broom? He would have his own broom. Oh, that settled it, more or less, in the economy of a 6-year-old. Then I suppose it would be all right. He returned to his soldiers, the question discharged, and Narcissa sat a moment longer in the warmth of a child who had never been cold, and made a vow that within the month there would be 2 of them in this house, and that neither would ever again be made to feel like the one who did not belong. Severus Snape arrived at the manor after dark, as he arrived everywhere, like weather. She received him alone in the small study, the one with the green fire, and she did not offer him the chair across the desk, because she wanted him standing where the firelight could reach his face. He came in with his coat still about him and his expression set to the careful nothing he wore in this house, and he inclined his head and waited. Severus, thank you for coming so quickly. Lucius's note said it concerned a child in the law. His voice was level as still water. I am at a loss as to which child of this house requires legal intervention. Draco is by every account thriving. It is not Draco. She let the silence draw out one beat past comfort. It is a ward I intend to take into this house under the watching interest of the Black estate, a boy of 6, kin to my line by Doria Black. He has been hidden these 5 years with Muggle relations who starve him, and I mean to take him out of that house and raise him as my own. I want you to authenticate his condition before I move so that no one can ever call it theft. His face did not change, and that was the tell, because a face with nothing to hide changes constantly, and only a face guarding something goes still. And the boy's name, he said. You know his name, Severus. You have known it since I said the words Doria Black and watched you go to stone. She rose and crossed to him, and the green fire put its light along the side of his face and found nothing there but the rigid labor of holding nothing there. His name is Harry Potter, Lily Evans's son. And you are going to tell me, before this night is out, what it is about that boy that you have carried for 6 years and told no one, because I am about to make him a Malfoy, Severus, and I will not do it blind, and you are the one man in England who cannot lie to me well enough to stop me asking. For a moment the only sound in the study was the green fire, and Severus Snape looked at her with an expression she had seen on him exactly once before, on the worst night of his life. Then he closed his eyes, and when he opened them something behind them had eased a fraction off its latch. "Sit down, Narcissa," he said it very quietly. "If you're truly going to do this, there are things you must hear first, and you will want to be sitting when you hear them." She sat. He did not. "I loved his mother," Severus said, and the words came out of him like stones pried from a wall that had been built over them. "From the time I was 9 years old until the night she died, and after it, I loved Lily Evans, and I did her wrong I will not insult you by describing, and she married James Potter, and I—" He stopped. Began again, drier, steadier, the wall rebuilding itself even as he spoke past it. "When the Dark Lord marked her for death, I went to Dumbledore. I begged him to protect her. I have served Dumbledore since on the strength of that begging, and Dumbledore has let me believe my service buys her son's safety. So I told myself the boy was safe with his mother's blood, behind wards no one could breach. I did not ask whether safe and unharmed were the same word. I see from your face that they are not. They are not, no." Something moved across him that was very close to grief and very close to fury, and he mastered it, because mastering it was the only thing he knew how to do with it. Then hear the rest, because the rest is why he hid the boy at all. "There is a prophecy, Narcissa. I will not give you its words, I do not have all of them, and the half I delivered to the Dark Lord myself, which is the wrong I did not describe. But Dumbledore believes the boy and the Dark Lord are bound, that one of them must die at the hand of the other, and that the boy is the only blade that will ever fit the wound. He did not hide Harry Potter to keep him gentle. He hid him to keep him hungry, obedient, grateful, malleable, ignorant of his own worth, until the day Dumbledore requires him to walk willingly toward the Dark Lord and end it. He's not raising a child. He's seasoning a weapon, and he chose a cupboard because a boy who has known nothing but a cupboard will follow the first hand that offers him daylight, straight to his death if the hand asks it." The green fire hissed. Narcissa sat with her hands folded in her lap and felt the last of the heat in her chest go cold and hard and certain, which was what heat did in a black when it was given time to set. "Then I will offer him the daylight," she said, "and the hand, and I will not ask him to die for it. Dumbledore raised him hungry so he would follow. I will raise him full so that when the day comes he chooses for himself, and a boy who has been loved chooses very differently than a boy who has been starved." She rose. "You will document the abuse tonight, Severus, and you will tell no one what you have told me, and you will help me take that child out of his cupboard. Not for the Dark Lord, not for Dumbledore, for Lily, if you need a reason you can carry. I am giving you the one thing Dumbledore never offered you, a way to keep her son alive that does not end in a sacrifice." Severus Snape looked at her across the green fire, and for the first time in 6 years his face stopped guarding anything at all. "Tell me where he is," he said. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. The custody. Severus came back from Surrey at 3 in the morning with a face like a closed door and a roll of parchment that he set on Narcissa's desk without a word. She read it by the green fire. He had gone in under a disillusionment after the Dursleys slept, and he had done what a potions master and one-time healer's apprentice could do in a dark cupboard with a sleeping child. Catalogued, measured, recorded. The parchment was clinical. That was its power. It did not rage. It listed a 6-year-old's weight against the median for his age and found him in the bottom 100th. It listed 2 improperly set fractures in the left forearm, healed crooked, never seen by a healer. It listed scarring consistent with a hot stove, scarring consistent with a belt, and a pattern of vitamin deficiency that did not come from a single bad season but from years. At the bottom, in Severus's narrow hand, was a single line that was not clinical at all, and which she suspected had cost him more than the rest. "The child did not wake when I examined his arm." A child who does not wake at a stranger's touch in the dark has learned that waking is more dangerous than whatever is being done to him. "It will hold," she said. "No Wisengamot will read this and call what I am doing a kidnapping. It will hold." Severus had not sat. He stood at the window with his back to her, looking at a garden he could not see. "I have served Albus Dumbledore for 6 years on the understanding that my service kept her son safe. I would like you to understand, Narcissa, that I did not know. I told myself a story and I never went to check it, and a wiser man would call that a kind of cruelty too. A wiser man would. I am not in the business of telling you what you already know about yourself at 3 in the morning. She rolled the parchment and sealed it with the black crest, not the Malfoy. The distinction mattered. This was a black matter, and she wanted every seal on every document to say so. "Be here at noon. Bring the calming draught and the nutritive regimen and whatever a starved child can keep down without being made sick by kindness. We take him tomorrow. Tomorrow. The longer I know and do nothing, the more I become the people across the road. Tomorrow, Severus." He inclined his head and went out into the dark, and Narcissa sat with the sealed roll until the fire burned down and did not sleep and was not tired. The proxy came from Gringotts at 10, carried by a goblin courier who would not give it to a house elf, and would not give it to Lucius, and put it into Narcissa's own hands with a receipt she signed in blood that beaded and did not smear. It was a beautiful piece of work. She had asked for teeth and they had given her teeth. The watching interest invoked, the proxy named, the kindred claim asserted over the minor heir of House Potter, every clause witnessed and sealed and dated, with a goblin attestation appended that the claim was older in law than the institution of the Wisengamot itself. A document like this did not ask the ministry for permission. It informed the ministry of a fact. She arranged her witnesses with the same care. A theft of a child could be undone. A thing done in the open, before persons of standing with the law in hand, could not. She brought a notary from the Department of Magical Law who owed Lucius a favor large enough that he would witness and small enough that he would not gossip. She brought a healer from St. Mungo's, an old woman named Edgecombe whose discretion was a matter of professional pride, to examine the boy on the threshold and confirm in her own hand what Severus had recorded in his. And she brought Severus himself because she wanted one person there who loved the child already, even if he would rather have died than say so. She did not bring Draco. There were things a son should not watch his mother do, and the breaking of 2 adults was one of them. They went to Privet Drive at noon when the street was empty and the husband was at his office selling drills and the wife was alone in her clean kitchen with the boy she had starved. Narcissa did not knock under a notice me, not this time. She walked up the path in dove gray with the proxy in her hand and the notary and the healer at her shoulders, and she rang the bell, and she let Petunia Dursley open her own front door to the end of her own world. Yes, Petunia's eyes went over them, the cut of the clothes, the bearing, the strangeness, and her face did the arithmetic of a woman who has spent her life terrified that the neighbors will see something. If you're selling, we don't, Mrs. Dursley. Narcissa did not raise her voice. She had never in her life needed to raise her voice. My name is Narcissa Malfoy. I am here for the child you keep in the cupboard under your stairs. The color went out of Petunia's face so fast it was like watching water drain. She knew. That was the thing Narcissa had wanted to see and now saw, not surprise, not confusion, but the specific animal fear of a person who has always known this day might come and has spent 10 years pretending it would not. Petunia knew exactly which child and exactly what cupboard and exactly what had been done in this house, and her first instinct was not denial. It was to glance over her shoulder at the stairs, at the small white door under them. There's no, she began, do not. Narcissa stepped over the threshold, and Petunia gave way before her as the soft give before the hard, because there are people in the world who have never learned how to stand in a doorway and mean it, and Petunia Dursley was one of them, and Narcissa Black was not. I have a healer who will examine him. I have a notary of the Ministry of Magic who will witness his condition. I have in my hand a guardianship claim that supersedes every arrangement under which that boy was placed in your keeping. You may make this difficult, Mrs. Dursley, in which case I will have a great deal of time and a great deal of law, and you will have neither. Or you may open the cupboard, choose quickly. My patience is not what it was an hour ago. Petunia Dursley looked at the proxy, which she could not read, and at the notary's robes, which she could, and at the woman in gray who had brought the world she hated to her own hall, and something in her collapsed inward, not to grief, Narcissa noted, but to calculation of a meaner kind, the calculation of a woman working out how to come out of this with her reputation and her Vernon intact. He's a burden, Petunia said, and it came out of her in a low rush, the words of a decade let loose all at once. You don't know what he is. The things that happen around him, he's not natural, he's like her. He was always like her, and we took him in out of charity when no one else would. We put a roof over you put him under a staircase, said Narcissa, and drew his inheritance into your husband's account for 5 years while you fed him your son's leavings. Do not say charity to me, Mrs. Dursley. I have read the ledger. I know to the galleon what your charity cost you, which is nothing, and what it earned you, which was a very great deal. Open the cupboard, Petunia. A boy's voice, heavier, older, the cousin, summoned by the strange voices, came from the kitchen, and Petunia flinched toward it, toward the family she was choosing even now, and Narcissa understood that the woman would give the boy up without a fight, that there would be no tearful scene, no clinging, that 10 years of cruelty would end not in drama but in a mother shooing one child behind her and surrendering another like an unwanted parcel. It was, in its way, the cruelest thing she had witnessed all day. Narcissa crossed the hall herself and opened the cupboard under the stairs. The smell came first, old dust, a child's unwashed bedding, the faint sourness of a space never properly aired. Then her eyes adjusted to the dark and she saw him. He had pressed himself into the back corner, knees to chest, one arm up across his face, braced for whoever opened the door, because whoever opened the door had never once in his memory opened it for a kind reason. He was wearing the gray jumper from the garden. There was a thin mattress and a broken soldier with no paint and a child's drawing taped to the slats, a drawing of a family she saw, 4 stick figures and a son, and the boy had drawn himself outside the house, a 5th small figure standing alone on the grass. She looked at the drawing for 1 second and then she made herself stop looking at it because she had a job to do and grief would have to wait its turn. She knelt. She was in dove gray and she knelt on the dirty floor of a cupboard under a staircase in Surrey, and she brought herself down below the boy's eye level so that for the first time in his life an adult was looking up at him instead of down, and she kept her voice very low and very even. Harry, she said, my name is Narcissa. I am not going to touch you. I am not going to shout. I have come a long way to find you, and I am going to take you out of this house today, and you are never going to sleep in this cupboard again. You do not have to believe me yet, you only have to come out. Will you come out, Harry? The boy lowered his arm a fraction. The green eyes found her in the dark, wary, exhausted, far too old. Are you, he said, and his voice was a whisper worn thin from not being used kindly, are you going to send me somewhere worse? It was not the question of a child who hoped. It was the question of a child who had learned that the only thing change ever brought was a different shape of bad, and it went into Narcissa like a blade going in clean, and she did not let it show on her face because the one thing this boy did not need was to watch a stranger fall apart over him. No, she said, I am going to send you somewhere better. I am going to send you to a house with a fire in your own room and food whenever you are hungry and a boy your own age who's going to be your brother, and the people who hurt you are never going to be allowed near you again. I give you my word, Harry, and a black does not give her word lightly, which is a thing you will come to understand. Now, will you take my hand, or shall I simply wait here until you are ready? I have, as it happens, all the time in the world. For a long moment the boy did not move. And then slowly, with the caution of a creature that has been struck for reaching, Harry Potter put one thin hand into the gloved hand of Narcissa Malfoy and let her draw him out of the dark. Behind them, the kitchen had emptied of Petunia's bravado. Narcissa stood in the hall with the boy's hand in hers and turned her full attention on the woman for the last time, and she let the ice show now, all of it, the thing she had kept banked behind courtesy since the doorbell. You will not be punished by me, she said, which I want you to understand is not mercy, it is contempt. You are not worth the trouble of ruining Petunia Dursley. But hear this, because it is the only thing I came to say to you. This boy is now the ward of the House of Black, and one day, sooner than you think, he is going to be one of the most powerful men in a world you have spent your life pretending does not exist. He will not come back for you. He is better than that, and he will be raised better than that. But you will spend the rest of your small life knowing that the freak in your cupboard grew up to be everything you were afraid of, and that the only mark you left on him was the one he overcame. That is your portion. I leave you to it. She turned and walked the boy out into the daylight, and the notary and the healer fell in behind her, and Edgecombe paused only to look back once at the house with an expression that promised a report which would make certain doors in St. Mungo's and the ministry quietly close against the name Dursley forever. None of them looked at Petunia again. There are punishments worse than attention, and Narcissa had just administered one. On the front step in the clean July light, the boy stopped and looked up at the sky as though he had not been allowed to look at it properly in a long time, and Narcissa let him, and the healer knelt and examined him there on the step with gentle hands and confirmed in a low voice everything Severus had written. And then the woman in gray put a traveling cloak around the thin shoulders, far too big, warm, smelling of cedar and something green, and the boy pulled it close around himself, and for one instant, something crossed his face that Narcissa had not seen there before and could not have named except that it had been absent, the first faint, unpracticed shape of hope. It nearly undid her. She let nothing show, and she took his hand again, and she said, "Hold on to me, Harry. The way we travel is strange the first time. It will be over before you are frightened." And it was. 3 counties away, in a circular office at the top of a tower, a silver instrument that had spun smoothly for 10 years gave a single discordant shriek and stopped. Albus Dumbledore was at his desk with a lemon sherbet half unwrapped when it happened, and he was on his feet before the sound had finished, because he knew that instrument had made it, had set it to the resonance of a particular protection anchored in a particular child's blood and the blood of his mother's sister. It had measured the strength of the wards at Privet Drive every hour of every day for a decade. It had just told him the wards were gone, not weakened, not breached. Gone, collapsed from the inside, as a ward collapses when the bond it is anchored to is severed at the root, which could happen for exactly one reason. The child it protected was no longer a member of that household in any sense the old magic recognized. He had been removed not as a guest is removed, but as a son is removed, claimed by another house, taken under a law deeper than the one Dumbledore had used to put him there. The old man stood very still in the wreck of his certainty. He had built the boy's whole childhood on those wards. He had endured Minerva's objections and Hagrid's tears and the gnawing of his own conscience on the strength of one argument, that the blood protection made the cupboard worth it, that no cruelty Petunia Dursley could devise outweighed the shield her blood provided against the thing that would one day come hunting. He had told himself the boy was safe. He had not let himself ask whether the boy was happy, because he had needed the boy malleable and grateful and shaped to a single purpose, and a happy child is none of those things. And now the boy was gone, and the only law that could have taken him was older than Dumbledore's, and the only houses that held such law were the old pureblood lines, and there was only one of those that had any reason in the world to reach for Harry Potter. Malfoy, Albus Dumbledore said to the empty office, and for the first time in a great many years, the most powerful wizard in Britain felt the specific cold of a man who has just discovered that the board he thought he owned has another player on it, and that the player has moved while his back was turned, and that the piece he had been saving for the endgame was no longer his to move at all. He sat down slowly. The lemon sherbet lay forgotten on the desk. Somewhere below him a portrait asked if he was quite well, and he did not answer because he was thinking, harder than he had thought in years, about a boy with green eyes in a house full of snakes, and about how very, very difficult it was now going to be to get him back. Harry Potter's first sight of Malfoy Manor was the gates. They were black iron grown through with iron roses, and they opened of their own accord at the woman's approach, and beyond them a gravel drive ran straight as a drawn line between hedges taller than the tallest man he had ever seen, toward a house so large that his first thought, the reflexive thought of a boy raised to expect work, was that it must take an enormous number of people to keep it clean. He did not say this. He had learned not to say his thoughts. He held the edge of the borrowed cloak and walked where the woman walked and waited to be told what was expected of him. Inside, it was warm. He noticed that before anything else, because he had been cold for so long that warmth had become a thing, he noticed the way other people notice cold. The hall was all pale stone and dark wood and a staircase that went up and up, and there were no shoes by the door and no smell of frying and no television and none of the ordinary things, and he stood in the middle of all of it feeling very small and very gray and very certain that he was about to do something wrong without knowing what. Harry. The woman crouched again the way she had in the cupboard, bringing herself down to him. This is your home now. I'm going to say some things and I want you to hear them once and then not worry about them. You do not have to earn your place here. You will not be doing the cooking or the weeding or the cleaning. There are house elves for that, and you will meet them and you will be kind to them because kindness to those beneath you is the truest mark of breeding there is. You will eat at the table with the family. You will have your own room, your own clothes, your own things, and they will be yours and no one will take them. Do you understand me so far? The boy looked at her. Why, he said, it was not ungrateful, it was bewildered, the honest bewilderment of a child to whom no one had ever given anything without a reason that cost him later. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I know that you are kin to me by blood, which to my family is the strongest reason there is. I know that you were wronged and that I am in a position to right it. And I know she paused and chose honesty, because she had decided in the cupboard that she would not build this child's new life on the kind of comfortable lies the last one had been built on. I know that you remind me of someone I might have been in a house I grew up in before I learned to be hard. That is more reason than most people are given, Harry. You will find it is enough. A man's voice came from the top of the stairs then, cool and clear. Narcissa. Lucius Malfoy descended into his own hall like weather of a different kind from Severus's, bright, cold, the front that comes before a frost. He stopped 3 steps from the bottom and looked down at the boy, and the boy looked up at him, and Harry felt the full weight of being assessed by a man who assessed everything for its value and held very still under it. So, Lucius said, this is the famous Mr. Potter. He came the rest of the way down and walked a slow circle around the boy, and Harry turned to keep him in view, because you did not let a large man you did not trust get behind you, and Lucius saw the instinct and something flickered in his pale face, not warmth but interest, the interest of a connoisseur who has been handed a piece he expected to be ordinary and finds it is not. He is half-starved Narcissa and dressed like a scarecrow, and he watches the room like a duelist. Where did the duelist come from, I wonder, in a child raised by muggles? From staying alive, said Narcissa. He has had to be clever to survive. We will give him better things to be clever about. Lucius stopped his circling in front of the boy and crouched, bringing his cold gray eyes level with the green ones, and for a moment the two of them looked at each other, the lord of the house and the ruined heir, and neither blinked. Let us understand one another, Mr. Potter, since you are clearly old enough in the ways that matter. You did not ask to come here, and I did not first ask for you to come. We are both, then, doing something we did not choose, and we may as well do it with our eyes open. This house will give you a great deal. In time it may ask something of you in return. I do not yet know what, neither do you. But I will tell you this for nothing, because I dislike beginning with a lie. In this family, what you are worth is what you can do, and I have just watched a half-starved 6-year-old refuse to let me stand behind him. You are worth a great deal more than the people across the road ever guessed. See that you become worth even more, and you and I will get along admirably. It was not kind. It was, Harry would understand much later, the most honest thing anyone had said to him in his life, and the only welcome that did not ask him to pretend, and some part of the boy that had spent 6 years being told he was worth nothing took that cold appraisal and held on to it like a coal. All right, Harry said. Lucius's mouth moved at one corner, which on Lucius Malfoy was the equivalent of a broad grin in another man. All right, he agreed and rose and looked at his wife over the boy's head. The right, he said, tonight, before he sleeps under this roof, the claim must be sealed properly, or it is only paper, and paper Dumbledore can chew through. Severus, you brought what is needed. I brought it, said Severus from the doorway, where he had been standing unnoticed in the manner he made an art of. He was looking at the boy, at the gray jumper and the green eyes and the borrowed cloak, and whatever was happening behind his closed face was happening very far down, where no one could see it. It is ready when you are. They fed him before the rite because Narcissa would not put a starved child through old magic on an empty stomach, and because she wanted to see how he ate. She learned a great deal from watching him eat. The house elf set a plate before him, not a feast. She had forbidden a feast. A body that has been starved for years cannot be mended by drowning it in one night, and Harry looked at the plate and then looked at her, and then looked back at the plate and did not touch it. "It is yours," she said. "You may eat it." He picked up the fork as though it might be taken from him, and he ate the first few bites fast, hunched over the plate with one arm curved around it, a posture she recognized from prisons and from her own family's worse years, the posture of someone who eats quickly because food in his experience does not stay. Then halfway through he stopped, he set the fork down, he looked stricken. "Am I allowed all of it?" he said, "all of it. And more if you're still hungry, though I will tell you honestly that more tonight will make you sick, and I would rather you trusted me about that than learned it the hard way." "I'm not," he started, and she saw him reach for the reflex, the automatic disclaiming of need that a child learns when need has only ever been punished, and then she watched him decide, visibly, to set the reflex down, the first deliberate act of trust she had seen from him. "I'm still hungry," he admitted, very quietly, as though confessing to a crime. "Then we will go slowly, and you will be hungry less and less, until one day you are not hungry at all, and you have forgotten what it was to wonder whether you were allowed." She nodded to the elf, who brought a little more. "Eat. No one in this house is timing you." Across the table, Lucius watched the boy over the rim of his glass with the unreadable attention he gave to investments, and Severus watched him from the doorway with an attention that was not unreadable at all to anyone who knew where to look, which in that room was only Narcissa. And Harry, who had spent his whole life being watched for failures, ate his second helping more slowly than the first and did not hunch over it, and when he had finished he said, without being prompted, "Thank you for the food," in the careful voice of a boy who had been taught that thanks were owed and beaten when they were not given, and Narcissa thought, "We will fix that too. We will get to a place where he thanks me because he means it and not because he is afraid." "You are welcome, Harry," she said, and meant it enough for both of them. It was Draco in the end who broke the careful quiet of the table, because Draco had been brought down in his dressing gown to meet the new arrival and had been uncharacteristically silent for nearly 4 whole minutes, a personal record. He had been studying Harry across the table with Frank's 6-year-old appraisal, and now he delivered his verdict. "You eat like fathers hunting dogs," Draco announced, fast. "Like someone's going to take it," Draco, said Narcissa. But Harry had gone still, braced for the cruelty that always followed being noticed, and so it surprised everyone, including possibly himself, when Draco frowned and went on, "You don't have to. Nobody takes food here. If you're still hungry tomorrow, you can just go to the kitchens and Dobby gives you whatever you want, even cake, even before lunch, and nobody minds." He said it with the slightly affronted air of a child sharing privileged information he was not entirely sure the newcomer deserved. "I'll show you the kitchens tomorrow if you want." It was not kindness exactly. It was a 6-year-old establishing the terms of his domain to a newcomer. But underneath it was the offer, the first thread thrown across the gap, and Harry heard the offer in it, because a boy who has learned to read every voice for threat can also, when he chooses, read one for something else. "Okay," Harry said. "Thanks. You say thanks a lot," Draco observed. "Draco," said Narcissa again with more weight, but she was not truly displeased because she had just watched her son offer something to a stranger and a stranger accept it. And she knew that whatever else this night held, the foundation of the thing she had risked everything for had just been laid across a dinner table over cake that had not yet been eaten, between 2 boys who did not yet know they were brothers. Severus in the doorway said nothing at all, but when Narcissa glanced at him she found that the careful nothing had slipped just for a moment, and what was under it was not grief and not fury, but something far more dangerous to a man who had built his life on not feeling it. Hope, raw and unguarded, the hope of a man watching Lily Evans's son be offered cake in a warm room by a boy who would defend him. He saw her see it. He stepped back into the shadow of the doorway and rebuilt his face. Neither of them spoke of it then or ever, but it was there, and they both knew it was there, and it changed something between them that would matter later. They did the rite at midnight in the oldest room of the manor, which lay below the house where the foundations met the bedrock and the family's first hearth had burned for 900 years. It was not a large room. Narcissa had told him it would be strange and that he should not be frightened, and Harry, who had decided somewhere around the second warm meal of his life that he would trust this woman a little further each time she proved true, was less frightened than he might have been. The walls were rough stone older than the rest of the house. In the center a fire burned in a hearth of black rock, and the fire was not the color fire should be. It had a depth to it, a sense of going down a long way, as though it were not sitting in the hearth so much as looking out of it. Around the hearth the old magic of the place lay thick as held breath. "This is the hearth," Narcissa said. Her voice had changed. It had the cadence of ritual, words worn smooth by centuries of mouths. "It has burned since before the statute, since before the ministry, since before the Malfoys were Malfoys and the Blacks were Blacks. It knows blood, it will know yours. Stand here, Harry, and do not let go of my hand, whatever you feel, and answer when you are asked. The old magic does not bargain and it does not lie. It only recognizes what is true." She drew a thin silver blade and pricked her own thumb, and then gently with his nod the ball of his, and she pressed the two small wounds together over the black hearth, her blood and his, black blood and Potter blood that was black blood 3 generations back, and she spoke into the fire in a tongue Harry did not know, old and rolling, and the fire heard her. It rose. It did not roar, it rose, silent and tall, and turned from its deep dark color to clear pale silver, and the warmth of it went through Harry's hand where it met Narcissa's and up his arm and into his chest, and it was looking at him. He felt it look at him, the whole ancient attention of 900 years of a house turning to consider one half-starved boy and ask, in something older than language, "Who are you and by what right do you stand at my heart?" And Harry, who did not know the words of the rite, who had been given no answer to recite, opened his mouth and the truth came out of him because the fire would accept nothing else. "Harry," he said, "Harry James Potter, and I don't have anywhere else," and she said I could stay. For a moment nothing happened, and Narcissa's hand tightened on his, and Harry thought, with the resignation of a child long accustomed to being found wanting, that he had failed even this, that the fire too had measured him and judged him not enough. Then the silver flame bent down and touched him, and it did not burn. It went over him like warm water, head to foot, and where it passed something loosened that had been clenched so long he had forgotten it was clenched. The flinch, the fold, the bracing, the held breath of 6 years lived in a cupboard waiting for the next bad thing, and for the space of 3 heartbeats Harry Potter felt, for the first time in his memory, entirely safe, the bone-deep safety of a child who is wanted by something far larger than himself. The fire knew him, the house knew him. The blood had answered, and the answer was yes. When the flame sank back into the black hearth it had changed color again, and the color it had changed to was green, the clear green of new beech leaves with the light behind them, and it held that color and would hold it, Narcissa understood, with a strange tightness in her chest, for as long as the boy lived under this roof. The hearth of the House of Black had taken a Potter to itself and made him kin in the only court that could not be appealed, and there was now no law in Britain, no Wisengamot decree, no chief warlock's signature, no claim of blood ward or guardianship that could take this child out of this house against the will of the magic that had just claimed him. Dumbledore could come. He could bring the ministry and the order and the full weight of his reputation. He would find the door shut by something he could not argue with, because it had stopped being a matter of law the moment the fire turned green. "It is done," Severus said quietly from the edge of the firelight, and his voice was not quite steady. "Lily's son is a black." "Lily's son," Narcissa agreed, looking down at the boy whose hand still held hers, who was swaying now with the exhaustion of a day that had taken him from a cupboard to the heart of an ancient house, "is going to bed." She gathered him up. He weighed nothing. He weighed less than Draco had at 3, and that fact lit the banked coal in her chest all over again, and carried him up out of the old dark and through the sleeping house to the east wing, to the room beside her son's, aired and warmed with a fire already lit, and she laid him in a bed that was his, in a room that was his, and pulled the covers to his chin. He was asleep before she reached the door. She paused there with her hand on the frame and looked back at him, this stranger's child who was now her own by fire and blood, and she let herself feel, for one unguarded moment, the whole enormous weight of what she had done that day and would have to carry every day after, the war it would bring to her door, the husband she had outmaneuvered, the old man 3 counties away even now beginning to plot the recovery of his weapon, the danger she had walked her family into with her eyes open. She felt all of it. And she found, examining it the way she examined everything, that she would do it again without a moment's hesitation, that she had crossed a line in a cupboard in Surrey that she would never recross, and that the cold, controlled, careful woman who had gone to Gringotts to read a ledger was simply not the woman standing in this doorway, and never would be again. A small sound made her turn. Draco was in the corridor in his nightclothes, woken by the movement of the house, his fair hair tousled and his face caught between sleep and suspicion. He looked past her at the figure in the bed, the strange thin boy in the room that had stood empty beside his all his life, and then up at his mother, and the question on his face was the oldest question one child asks about another. "Is that him?" Draco whispered. "The brother, that is him." Draco considered the sleeping shape with the gravity of a 6-year-old surveying a permanent alteration to his entire world. "He's very small," he said at last, doubtfully, "and his clothes are horrible. He has been somewhere horrible. We are going to fix both." She came out and drew the door half-closed behind her and put a hand on her son's shoulder, turning him gently back toward his own room. "Go to sleep, Draco. You can decide what you think of him tomorrow when he is awake and can decide what he thinks of you. That is only fair." Draco went with several backward glances. At his own door he stopped. "Mother," a pause, the genuine article, the question under the question. "Did somebody hurt him before?" Narcissa looked at her son, her certain, spoiled, much-loved son who had never been cold or hungry or afraid a single day of his life, and who had just looked at a stranger and seen, with the unspoiled instinct children sometimes have before the world teaches them not to, the one true thing about him. "Yes," she said, "somebody hurt him very badly for a very long time." Draco's small jaw set in a manner that was entirely his father's. "Then they should be sorry," he said, with the absolute moral clarity of the very young, and went into his room and shut the door. Narcissa stood alone in the dark corridor between her two sons' rooms, and for the second time that day something undid itself in her chest, and for the second time she let it, because there was no one there to see. "Yes," she said softly, to the closed door, to the sleeping boy, to the house, to the old man 3 counties away, to all of it. They should. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Raised a Malfoy. The flinch was the last thing to leave him, and it left in a single afternoon 3 months in. By then Harry had stopped hunching over his food and started sleeping through the night more often than not. He had filled out at the wrists and the cheeks. Severus's regimen was patient, and the Manor's kitchens were endless, and a body 6 years starved will mend faster than the mind that lived in it. He had learned the geography of the house and the names of the elves and the rule that he was to be kind to them. He had begun in careful increments to believe that the food would keep coming and the room would stay his and the woman would not change her mind. But the flinch remained, the old automatic fold at any sudden movement above his head, and Narcissa had decided not to push it, because some things in a child cannot be argued out and can only be outlived. It went in the end over a dropped book. She had been reading to him. She had discovered he could barely read, that the Dursleys had let him fall years behind, and she had taken the remediation as her personal project with the cold thoroughness she brought to everything she decided to own. And she had reached above his head to return a volume to its shelf, and the volume had slipped, and her hand had come down fast to catch it. And Harry had thrown both arms up over his face and dropped to the floor between the chairs, curled small, braced, a sound coming out of him that was not a word. Narcissa did not flinch back. That was the whole of it, that was the entire technique, and it was the hardest thing she had done since the cupboard. Every instinct she had told her to gather him up, to soothe, to make the moment smaller, and she knew, with the part of her that had survived her own father, that gathering him up would teach him the fear was reasonable, that there had been something to brace against. So she held still. She kept her hands where he could see them, and she said in the flat, even voice she used for true things, "It was a book, Harry. It slipped off the shelf. I reached to catch it. No one in this house is ever going to strike you. Not when you are good, and not when you are bad, and not when you break something, and not when you are clumsy. Not ever. I am going to say that to you as many times as you need to hear it, and I am not going to be angry that you needed to hear it." The boy uncurled by degrees. He looked at the book on the floor. He looked at her hands, open, still, in her lap. And something happened in his face that she would remember for the rest of her life, a kind of grief-breaking, not at her, but at the size of what he was only now understanding he had lived through, the dawning comprehension of a child realizing that the thing that had been normal was not normal, had never been normal, that other children were not struck, that he had not deserved it, that it had been done to him, and was not a fact about what he was. He cried then properly for the first time since she had known him, great heaving sobs that shook his whole thin frame, and Narcissa did the second hardest thing, which was to let him, to sit near and not smother it, to let the grief come all the way up and out instead of pressing it back down where it had lived. When at last he was finished, wrung out, hiccuping, she held out one hand, palm up, an offer and not a grab, and he took it, and she drew him into her lap, and he let her, and they sat like that in the library while the fire burned down, and the flinch, which had survived the cupboard and the rescue and 3 months of safety, did not survive being named. It never came back. She told no one. But that night she wrote a letter she had been not writing for 15 years, and addressed it to a house in a part of the country no black was supposed to acknowledge, and sealed it, and held it a long while before she sent it. The rivalry came later, and it came, as these things do, dressed as something smaller. For the first months Draco had treated Harry as an interesting acquisition, a permanent guest, a project of his mother's that he was prepared to tolerate because it had come with the promise of someone to play with. He had shown Harry the kitchens, as threatened, and the grounds and the brooms, and had been gracious in the manner of a young prince displaying his holdings to a visitor who could not possibly own anything so fine. As long as Harry remained behind him, smaller, quieter, catching up, the arrangement suited Draco perfectly. The trouble began when Harry stopped being behind. It started with the reading. Once Harry could read, he read everything with the ravenous appetite of a mind that had been starved as thoroughly as the body and was now, like the body, mending fast. He read faster than Draco. He remembered more. When the tutor Narcissa had engaged for the boys asked questions, Harry's hand, tentative at first, then less so, began to be the one with the answer, and Draco, who had been the cleverest person in every room of his life because every room of his life had contained only people paid to tell him so, did not care for it at all. It came to a head over a chessboard. Lucius had taught both boys wizard's chess, partly because he enjoyed it and partly because he believed it taught the only lesson worth teaching, which was that the board does not care how you feel about your position. Draco had been playing for 2 years. Harry had been playing for 2 months. And on a wet afternoon in the green drawing room, Harry took Draco's king in 19 moves, having sacrificed his own queen to do it, a sacrifice Draco had gloated over for 3 full turns before he understood what it had bought. Draco swept the pieces off the board. "You cheated," he said, white-faced, his voice gone high. "You must have cheated, you've only just learned you can't. I didn't cheat." Harry had gone still in the old way, the braced way, but it was different now. There was something under the stillness that had not been there 3 months ago, something that did not fold. "You let me take your queen because you wanted it. I let you take mine because I needed you to." "Shut up. Shut up, you don't. This is my house. These are my things. You're only here because Mother felt sorry for you. You came from a cupboard, everyone knows. You came from nothing, and you'll always be nothing, and you can't just come here and be better than me at everything in my own." The fire in the grate flared. Not metaphorically, the flames leapt 3 feet up the chimney, and a chess piece on the swept floor cracked clean in half, and a wind that came from nowhere snapped through the closed room and rattled every window in it, and Draco scrambled backward off his chair with his eyes wide, because the magic in the room had turned all at once toward him, and it was Harry's, and it was furious. For a moment the two boys stared at each other across the wreck of the game, the air still moving, and Harry's hands were shaking, and his eyes were very bright, and the thing under the stillness was all the way up now, the thing the cupboard had built and safety had not yet softened, the rage of a child who has been told he is nothing so many times that the word has edges. Then Harry mastered it. She would ask him years later how he had learned to do that so young, to feel the magic rise and pull it back, and he would not be able to tell her except that in the cupboard the strange things that happened when he was angry had always made the bad worse, and so he had learned to put the lid on fast or pay for it. He put the lid on now. The fire sank, the wind died, and Harry stood up very pale and said, in a voice that was perfectly even and far too old, "I'm not nothing. I came from a cupboard because someone put me there. That's a fact about them. It isn't a fact about me." It was Narcissa's line, the library line, given back to the world by a boy who had taken it to heart. "And I'm not better than you at everything. You're better than me at flying and at potions and at knowing how to talk to people. I'm better than you at chess. That's allowed. Brothers are allowed to be better than each other at things," your mother said. And he walked out, leaving Draco alone in the wrecked room with the broken pieces and the dying fire and a feeling he did not have a name for, which was shame. Narcissa heard about it from the tutor, and then from a house elf, and then that evening from Draco himself, who came to her unbidden, which told her more than anything else could have. "He made the fire go big," Draco said. "He was trying for outrage and not quite reaching it. He could have hurt me. Could he? Did he? No, he stopped it." Draco scowled at the floor. "How did he stop it? I can't make the fire go big at all, not even when I try, and he did it without trying, and then he just stopped it, like turning off a tap. Because he has had to control himself his whole life in ways you have never had to, and control is a muscle, and his is very strong." She set down her pen and looked at her son. "Draco, what did you say to him before the fire?" The boy's face did the thing it did when he had been caught, the brief flicker before the bluster. "I said he came from a cupboard, and that he was nothing, and that he was only here because you felt sorry for him." It came out smaller and smaller. "I didn't mean I was losing. I wanted him to feel, you wanted him to feel like nothing because you felt like nothing, and you had just learned that you can hand the feeling to someone else like a hot coal. Yes, I know that move, Draco. I grew up in a house that ran on it." She came and crouched before him, bringing herself to his level, the posture she had used in the cupboard and used now for her own son. "I am going to tell you something about Harry, and I want you to listen to it as the most important thing I have ever told you, because it is. The people who had him before us told him he was nothing every day for 6 years. They told him with their words and with their hands and with a cupboard under the stairs. He is here in this house, alive and clever and learning to laugh, because somewhere in all of that he decided not to believe them. That is the strongest thing I have ever seen a person do, and he did it at 6, alone, with no one on his side. And tonight, the first person to call him nothing since he came here, the one person in this house who was supposed to be his brother, was you." Draco's lip trembled. "I am not telling you this to make you cry," she said. "I am telling you because you are better than what you did this afternoon, and because the thing I want for you more than cleverness or blood or any of it is for you to be the kind of man who stands at a wronged person's back instead of adding to the wrong. You will not always be the cleverest in the room, Draco. You met someone clever at chess and it frightened you and you reached for cruelty. There will be 1,000 rooms in your life with someone clever in them. You reach for cruelty every time. You will be a small man with powerful friends, and you will be alone because cruelty is how you tell the world you are afraid. You understand me?" "Yes," Draco whispered. "Then you know what you have to do." He did not want to. She watched him not want to with every fiber of his 6-year-old being, and she watched him do it anyway, which was the whole of what she had been trying to build in him, and she was prouder in that moment than the moment strictly warranted. He found Harry in the east wing, in the room that was his, sitting on the windowsill looking out at the dark grounds. Draco stood in the doorway and worked his jaw and finally got it out. "I'm sorry I said you were nothing. You're not nothing. You're really good at chess, and it made me feel stupid, and I was horrible because of it, and that was a small man's move." He repeated his mother's phrase with the careful gravity of a child deploying borrowed wisdom. I don't want to be a small man with powerful friends, so I'm sorry, and you can be better than me at chess. I'll just get better too, and then we'll both be good, and we can beat everyone else. Harry looked at him for a long moment from the windowsill, and Draco braced for the rejection he felt he had earned. And then Harry slid down off the sill and crossed the room and stuck out his hand. In the formal manner the tutor had been drilling into them both, and said, with the ghost of the first real smile Draco had seen on him, "Brothers, then, even when one of us is winning." "Brothers," Draco agreed and shook on it, and that not the right, not the fire, but a handshake between two 6-year-olds over a chess apology was the true beginning of the thing that would, in time, remake a war. The first time someone outside the family called Harry what he was, Draco nearly broke the boy's nose for it. Someone was Cassius Parkinson, 8 years old and the heir to a house that fancied itself a rung above the Malfoys and resented the evidence that it was not. He had been brought to the manor by his mother on a social call, deposited in the nursery wing with the two younger boys, and instructed to be charming, an instruction he interpreted, as certain children do, as license to establish dominance. He had circled Harry the way Lucius had once circled Harry, except that where Lucius's circling had been appraisal, Cassius's was a hunt. "You're the Potter," he said. "My father says you're a charity case. He says the Malfoys took you in because Potter's a famous name and they want to polish it up and wear it. He says you came from Muggles. He says you probably still smell of them." He wrinkled his nose theatrically. "Do you smell of them? Is that the smell?" Harry, who at 6 had not yet learned to fight back with words and had learned very thoroughly not to fight back with fists, went still and grey and said nothing, which Cassius took for victory and pressed. "My father says you'll always be common underneath, no matter what robes they put you in. He says blood tells. He says you can dress up a mudblood's leavings, but it's still—" He did not finish the word because Draco hit him. It was not a refined blow. Draco was 6 and Cassius was 8 and a head taller, and the punch caught Cassius on the cheekbone rather than the nose Draco had been aiming for, and it hurt Draco's hand more than Cassius's face. But it was delivered with the entire fury of a child who has been told the most important thing in the world and has decided to defend it, and it knocked Cassius Parkinson flat on the nursery floor in front of the house elves in a passing portrait, which was, in the economy of pureblood children, a humiliation worth 10 bruises. "Don't you ever," Draco said, standing over him, shaking, "ever call my brother that. He's not a charity case. He's not common. He's a black and a Potter, and he's cleverer than you and cleverer than your stupid father. And if you say one more word about him, I'll tell everyone at every party for the rest of your life that Cassius Parkinson got knocked down by someone 2 years younger, and I'll make it true because it just happened, and everyone will laugh at you forever." He was crying with rage, which undercut the menace not at all. "Get up and go home. You're not welcome here. Tell your father the Malfoys said so." Cassius got up and went home, and his mother left in a flurry of cold courtesies, and there was, predictably, a letter from the Parkinsons within the week that managed to be both an apology and a threat. Lucius read it at breakfast with an expression of profound satisfaction, and replied to it with 2 sentences that ended the matter and improved the Malfoys' standing measurably, because in their world a house that defended its own, even its adopted own, even against a social superior, was a house worth fearing. And the story of small Draco Malfoy flooring the Parkinson heir over an insult to the Potter boy traveled the drawing rooms of pureblood Britain within the fortnight, and did the family more good than a year of careful courtesies. But that was the adults' use of it. What mattered happened that afternoon after Cassius had gone, when Harry found Draco nursing his bruised knuckles in the window seat and stood in front of him not knowing what to say, because no one had ever been hurt on his behalf before, not once in his whole life, and he did not have the words for what it did to him. "You hit him," Harry said finally. "He deserved it. You'll get in trouble. I don't care." Draco flexed his sore hand and winced and tried to look as though he did not. "He called you that word about your mum. Our mum says it's the worst thing you can call someone, and only people with nothing else to be proud of use it." He looked up at Harry, fierce and certain. "I told you, at the chessboard. I said brothers fight anyone who calls you nothing. I meant it. I'm always going to mean it. That's how it works now." And Harry, who had survived 6 years by never letting anyone see what they could take from him, looked at the boy who had bloodied his own hand defending a name that wasn't even fully his yet, and felt something in him commit, finally and completely, in a way the right and the food and the warm room had begun but not finished. He had been brought into this family by his blood and by Narcissa's will. He stayed in it from that afternoon by choice because of a bruised 6-year-old fist and 4 words. "That's how it works now." "Okay," Harry said, which was still the only word he had for the largest things, and then because Draco's hand was swelling, "We should put it in cold water. I'll show you. I used to do it a lot." It was the wrong thing and the right thing at once, the casual revelation of how he knew to treat a hurt hand, the glimpse of the cupboard in it, and Draco caught it and did not make it strange and only said, "Okay." "Show me," and let his brother lead him to the bathroom and run the cold tap over his knuckles, and the two of them sat on the edge of the bath talking about how best to hit someone bigger than you, and were, by the time the swelling went down, entirely happy. Lucius tested the boy in the spring, and what he found rearranged his plans. He did it over breakfast, idly, the way he tested everyone, by laying out a problem and watching how it was solved. He had received a letter from Yaxley regarding a dispute over a parcel of land near the Goyle estate, a tangle of competing claims and old grudges, and he read the relevant portions aloud as though to himself, and then he said to no one in particular, "A pity. There is no clean way through it. Yaxley will sue, Goyle will countersue, and the Wisengamot will sit on it for a decade while the lawyers grow fat. Why don't they just trade?" said Harry. Lucius looked up. "I beg your pardon." Harry had gone slightly pink, the color of a child who has spoken before deciding whether he was allowed, but he pressed on because the problem interested him more than his caution did. "You said Yaxley wants the land because of the water, and Goyle wants it because of the boundary. They want it for different reasons, so they don't actually want the same thing, they only want the same field. If Yaxley gets the water rights and Goyle gets the boundary moved, they both win and they stop paying the lawyers, and they both owe you for thinking of it." He stopped, suddenly uncertain. "That's probably wrong. I don't know about land." Lucius set down the letter and regarded the boy across the table with an expression Narcissa had seen exactly twice in 18 years of marriage, the expression of a man who has found money he did not know he had. "It is not wrong," he said slowly. "It is, in fact, precisely correct, and it is also the thing the lawyers will never propose, because the lawyers are paid by the hour and a settlement pays them nothing. You have, at the age of 6, after hearing 4 sentences, identified the solution that 30 years of legal practice has every incentive to avoid. Where did you learn to think like that?" Harry considered the question seriously. "In the cupboard," he said. "If I worked out what Uncle Vernon actually wanted instead of what he was shouting about, I got hit less. He'd shout about the lawn, but really he wanted to feel like he was in charge. So if I let him feel in charge, the lawn didn't matter." He said it without self-pity, as a simple account of a tool. People want a feeling. The thing they're fighting about is just the feeling wearing clothes. There was a silence at the breakfast table. "Narcissa," said Lucius, not taking his eyes off the boy, "I find I must revise an estimate. I had assumed the value of this child lay in his name. I was mistaken. The name is the least of it." He folded Yaxley's letter and tucked it away, and the look he gave Harry now was the look he gave to assets he intended to develop, warm in its way and entirely calculating. "Mr. Potter, from tomorrow you will sit with me after breakfast 3 mornings a week, and I will teach you what the lawyers know and a great deal that they do not. You have a gift, and a gift left untrained is a discourtesy to whoever gave it to you. We will not waste yours." Harry, who had spent his life being told his gifts were freakishness, did not know what to do with being told his gifts were valuable, and so he simply nodded, and Lucius nodded back, and across the table Narcissa watched her husband fall in his cold and acquisitive way, half in love with the boy he had not wanted, and she said nothing, because it suited her purposes and because it was, despite everything, a little bit funny. That night Lucius wrote 3 letters to 3 old allies, and in each of them, between the lines about the Goyle land and the ministry appointments, he mentioned, as if in passing, that the Potter boy was settling in admirably under his roof, that the child showed a most promising disposition, that those who had assumed the boy who lived would grow up a creature of Dumbledore's might find themselves pleasantly surprised. He sealed the letters with the Malfoy crest and sent them into the night, already building in his own mind the trophy he would one day present, already certain he knew what the boy was for. He was a clever man, Lucius Malfoy. He was simply asking the wrong question. He was asking what Harry could be made into, and never once in all his careful planning did he ask what Harry might decide to make of himself. Severus taught them magic, and that was where the truth of the boy showed plainest. He came twice a week to teach the boys the theory that would underlie the wand work they were still too young for, and the foundations of potions, which had no age requirement but only required hands that did as they were told. Draco was good, careful, precise, a credit to his breeding. Harry was something else, and Severus, who had spent a career resenting the talent of James Potter, found himself in the uncomfortable position of watching James Potter's son and seeing again and again not James at all but Lily. It was in the questions. Draco asked how, Harry asked why. When Severus told them that Moonstone must be added to the draught of peace off the heat, or it would curdle, Draco wrote it down. Harry asked what it was about the heat that curdled it, and whether you could add it on the heat if you cooled the Moonstone first, and Severus found himself, to his own deep irritation, actually thinking about the answer because the question was a good one, the kind of question Lily had asked at the same age in a dungeon classroom 30 years gone, the kind of question that did not memorize the rule but interrogated it. The boy had James's eyes for an instant, and then he opened his mouth and Lily came out of it, and Severus did not know what to do with that, and so he did what he always did, which was to be cold and exacting and let nothing show, and to teach the boy as well as he had ever taught anyone, which was very well indeed. He has her mind, he told Narcissa once when the boys had gone. It was the only thing he ever said about it directly. I had thought I had been told he was James's son. He is James's son, but he thinks like her, and I do not know whether that is a mercy or a cruelty, and I would be obliged if you did not ask me again. And Narcissa did not ask him again. But she noticed that Severus stayed later on the days he taught, and corrected Harry's grip more gently than he corrected Draco's. And once, when Harry brewed a flawless first potion and looked up for the approval he had learned to expect from no one, Severus said, "Adequate," in a tone that any fool could hear meant something else entirely, and Harry beamed at him, and Severus left very quickly. On the broom, the order of things reversed, and Draco did not mind, which told Narcissa more about how far the boys had come than anything they said. Draco had flown since he was 4. He was good, fearless, showy, with the easy confidence of a child who had never once doubted the ground would catch him because he had never been allowed to fall. He had assumed reasonably that here at least he would stay ahead, that flying was his and the books were Harry's and the world would keep its sensible shape. Harry got on a broom for the first time on a clear morning in his 7th summer, and the world changed its shape again. He went up tentatively, white-knuckled, because a body that has been thrown does not trust the air. And then 10 feet up, something in him understood that nothing here would grab him, that there were no hands up here at all, that for the first time in his life he was somewhere no one could reach him, and the fear fell away off him like a dropped coat, and he leaned forward and he flew. He flew the way other people breathed. He did not think about it. The broom simply went where he wanted before he had finished wanting it, banking and climbing and falling into dives that stopped a handspin from the lawn, and his face, which had spent 6 years carefully showing nothing, broke open into pure undiluted joy, the joy of a child who has found the one place in the world that is entirely his. He laughed. Narcissa, watching from the terrace, realized she had never heard him laugh like that without checking first whether laughter was allowed. Draco shot up beside him, half delighted and half affronted. "You've never flown. How are you? That's not fair. You've never even—" "I know," Harry shouted back, breathless, delirious, looping the broom in a circle that should have thrown him and did not. "I don't know how I'm doing it. It just knows where I want to go." And Draco, who might have sulked, who a year ago certainly would have, looked at his brother's face, at the joy on it, the first unguarded joy any of them had seen, and could not sulk, because he had hit a boy for that face's sake, and you do not bloody your knuckles defending someone, and then begrudge them their one perfect morning. So instead he grinned and said, "Race you to the far oak then, since you're so clever," and lost and laughed about losing. And the two of them flew until they were called in for lunch and then begged to go back out, and Lucius, watching from the library window, made a note to acquire the boy the finest broom that money could buy, partly because an heir of his house should have the best of everything, and partly, though he would not have admitted it, because he had been moved. In the cold, dry way Lucius was capable of being moved, by the sight of a child discovering he was free. "He is a natural," Lucius said to Narcissa that evening. "I have never seen anything like it, not at that age. James Potter played seeker, did he not? The boy has it in the blood." "He has it because up there no one has ever hurt him," said Narcissa, who understood her son's joy better than her husband did. "It is the one place he has never had to be afraid. Of course he flies like that. He is the freest he has ever been." Lucius considered this and did not entirely understand it, because Lucius had never in his life been unfree and so could not feel the weight of what it meant to be released from it, but he bought the broom. The reply from the house in the part of the country no black was supposed to acknowledge came in early summer, and Narcissa read it alone in the garden 3 times. Andromeda's hand had not changed. The letter was guarded, of course. 15 years of silence does not dissolve in one exchange, but it was not cold, and at the end, after the careful paragraphs, her sister had written, "You will forgive me, Sissy, for asking what changed. You were always the one who never broke a rule, who married exactly where you were told, who watched them burn me off the family tree and said nothing. And now you write to me after all this time to tell me you have taken in an abused child and defied Dumbledore and the whole of polite society to do it. So I find I must ask, what happened to you?" And the answer, which Narcissa wrote back without hesitation because she had been living the answer for months, was, "A child happened to me. I looked at a boy in a cupboard and I understood, all at once, every wrong I had ever watched and said nothing about, including yours. I am not writing to apologize, Andromeda, because an apology that comes 15 years late is just a way of feeling better about the silence. I am writing because I have learned, too late but not entirely too late, that blood is not a wall you build people out of. It is a debt you owe them. I owed you one for 15 years. Consider this the first payment and bring your daughter to tea, because I am told she is remarkable, and I should like to know my niece before we are both too old to bother." She sent it before she could reconsider, and felt, sealing it, the particular vertigo of a person dismantling a wall she has stood behind her whole life, and found, to her surprise, that she did not miss the wall at all. The blood pact happened at the end of that first year, and it was entirely the boy's invention, and neither parent knew of it until it was done. Harry had asked Draco, in the careful way he still asked about the rules of his new world, what the green fire in the cellar had been, and Draco, who had not been allowed to watch the rite but had pieced together its outline from eavesdropping, explained with great authority and middling accuracy that it was how you became part of a family by blood, that you mixed your blood and said true things and the magic made it real, and after that no one could ever say you didn't belong. And Harry had gone quiet in the way that meant he was thinking, and then he had said, "Could we do it, you and me, so that even if your parents changed their minds, even if everything went wrong, it would still be real, just us, not the grown-up kind, the kind we choose." It was, Narcissa would think later when she finally learned of it, the most revealing thing the boy ever did in those early years. The request of a child who had learned that the love of adults could be withdrawn, who wanted one bond in the world that did not depend on anyone's continued goodwill, that he had chosen himself and could not lose. And Draco, who had never feared losing anything in his life, agreed at once because Harry wanted it and because it sounded like an adventure. They did it in the garden behind the yew hedge, with a pin Harry had taken from the sewing room and a great deal of solemnity. They pricked their thumbs as they had seen the grown-ups do and pressed them together, and because they did not know the old words they made up their own, which were better. "I'm Harry," said Harry, "and I choose you to be my brother, and I'll stand at your back even when you're wrong, and I'll tell you when you're wrong so you don't stay wrong, and nobody can ever make me stop." "I'm Draco," said Draco, "and I choose you to be my brother, and I'll never call you nothing again, and I'll fight anyone who does, and they'll be sorry, and nobody can ever make me stop either." And they pressed their thumbs together and felt very serious and slightly dizzy, and a wind moved through the yew hedge though the evening was still, and neither of them knew enough to understand that intent and blood and true words spoken in earnest are precisely the ingredients of older magic than they knew, and that the garden, which had stood on blackened Malfoy ground for 900 years and remembered the hearth's green fire, had heard them and had quietly, without fuss, made it real. Lucius found them coming back through the hedge with sticking plasters on their thumbs and identical expressions of conspiracy, and he asked no questions, because he had learned that the boys' conspiracies were generally harmless and occasionally instructive. He watched them go up to the house together, heads bent close, Harry saying something that made Draco laugh, and he felt in his cold, acquisitive heart a deep satisfaction at the sight, because he believed he was watching his plan come together, the boy who lived bound to his son, loyal to his house, a weapon being forged in the warmth of a brotherhood that Lucius had been clever enough to allow. He was right that a weapon was being forged. He was wrong about whose hand would hold it. But that error was years from showing, and for now Lucius Malfoy stood in his garden in the summer dusk and watched his two sons climb toward the lit house, and was, in the only way he knew how to be, content. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, 2 heirs by the time he was 10, Harry Potter had read every published account of his own life, and had concluded that he had never met the boy they were about. Lucius had set him to it deliberately. He had laid the books out on the library table, the cheap hagiographies, the serious histories, the children's tales in which the boy who lived defeated dragons that had never existed, and he had said, "Read these and tell me what they have in common." And Harry had read them, all of them, and come back with an answer that pleased his foster father enormously. "They're all about something that needs me to be a certain way," Harry said. "The light books need me to be pure and brave and a bit stupid, so I'll grow up and do whatever the brave and pure side tells me. The funny ones need me to be a hero so children will buy them. Even the serious history needs me to be a symbol, because if I'm just a baby whose mother died for him, then the war doesn't have a tidy ending, and everybody wants the war to have a tidy ending." He set the last book down. "None of them are about me. They're about what people need me to be. And the thing is, none of the writers ever met me, so they could make me into anything because there was nothing real in the way. And what," said Lucius, who was enjoying himself, "is the lesson? That whoever controls the story controls the boy." Harry frowned, "and that I should write my own, before someone else finishes writing it for me." Lucius smiled and believed he was teaching the boy to be a Malfoy, and did not notice that he was also teaching the boy to see exactly what Lucius himself was doing with him. That was the difficulty with raising someone clever. You could not teach them to read the game without teaching them to read you. Across the table, Draco, who had read the same books, added his own contribution, which was less subtle and more useful than he knew. "The funny ones are rubbish," he said, "but people believe them anyway. Crabbe believes them. Crabbe thinks you fought a dragon. I told him you didn't, and he didn't believe me. He believed the book." He shrugged. "So it doesn't matter if a story's true. It matters if people believe it. That's stupid, but it's how it is." "That," said Harry slowly, looking at his brother, "is actually the whole thing. That's the whole entire thing." And the two of them looked at each other across the table with the particular charge that passed between them when they had each supplied half of something neither had seen whole, and Lucius watched the charge pass and mistook it, as he mistook most things about the boys, for cleverness in service of his plans rather than cleverness assembling itself into plans of its own. Severus began teaching them to guard their minds the winter they turned 10, and the lesson taught him as much as it taught them. "There's a branch of magic," he told them in the cold dungeon cool room he used for the difficult work, called legilimency. It is the art of reading another mind, not as you read a face, Mr. Potter, though you are unnervingly good at that, but the thoughts themselves, the memories, the truth a person believes they have hidden. The Dark Lord was a master of it, so is Dumbledore, though he is too courteous to admit how often he uses it. You are both going to move in your lives among people who can do this. So you will both learn to stop them. The art of closing the mind is called occlumency, and it is the most important magic I will ever teach you because every other secret you keep depends on it. Draco struggled. It was not a failing in him. Most people struggled because occlumency asks you to be calm and ordered and empty on command, and Draco was a creature of quick feeling and quicker words, and his mind, when Severus pressed against it, was a bright, loud market that gave everything away. Severus was patient with him, more patient than he was with anyone, and Draco improved by inches, and that was normal, and that was fine. Harry closed his mind on the third attempt and then would not let Severus back in at all. Severus pressed and met a wall. He pressed harder with the focused will that had held against the Dark Lord himself, and met a wall that did not so much resist him as declined to be there, a smooth gray nothing, a room swept bare, a child who had simply somewhere learned to feel a hostile attention turned toward him and become unreadable before it arrived. Severus withdrew, breathing harder than he cared to, and looked at the boy with something close to alarm. "Where," he said, "did you learn to do that?" Harry considered the question with his usual seriousness. "I didn't really. It's the same as the parties. When Uncle Vernon was looking for a reason to be angry, I learned to go flat, empty. If there was nothing on my face and nothing he could find, sometimes he got bored and went away. I just did the same thing inside." He frowned, troubled by the look on his teacher's face. "Is it wrong? I can stop." "It is not wrong." Severus sat down, which he never did during lessons. "It is in fact a defense that grown wizards train for years to achieve and rarely master, and you have arrived at it untaught by surviving. I find I am angry, Mr. Potter, though not at you. I am angry that the same cruelty which should have broken you instead forged in you the precise armor you will need to survive everything that is coming. There is no justice in that. A child should not have had to build a fortress to keep out a man like Vernon Dursley. But you did, and the fortress is real, and it will keep out far more dangerous men than he ever was." He stood again, the moment sealed away. "Dumbledore will try to read you when you go to his school. He will be gentle and grandfatherly, and you will not feel it happen. You will feel it happen now, and you will give him the swept room, and you will smile at him over the top of it. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." Harry hesitated. "Sir, could I learn the other half too, the reading, legilimency? Not to use on people, just so I know what it feels like when it's used on me." And Severus, who had intended to teach the boys only defense, looked at the green eyes and the swept gray wall behind them and made a decision he would not examine too closely, because the truth of it was that he had decided, somewhere over the past 4 years, that this child would be better armed than any pawn in any plan, that whatever Dumbledore or Lucius or the Dark Lord intended, Lily's son would walk into it knowing every weapon they might use, because Severus would have given them to him first. "In time," he said, "when you are older, and only if your control holds. The reading is more dangerous to the reader than the read, and I will not have you learning it badly. But yes, Harry, in time I will teach you both halves." And he did not notice that he had used the boy's given name, and Harry did, and said nothing, and put it away somewhere warm. The Malfoy Yule Ball was the event of the season, and the season was the only war the pureblood houses had been able to wage openly since the Dark Lord fell, which made it more vicious than any battlefield. Narcissa had been preparing the boys for it for a month, not the dancing, which they had drilled until they were competent, but the room itself. "It is not a party," she told them the morning of. "It is a map. Every person in that hall is a position, and the positions move, and your task tonight is not to be charming, though you will be charming. Your task is to read the map, who stands with whom, who has stopped standing with whom since last year, who laughs at whose jokes and who only pretends to. By the end of the night I want each of you to tell me 3 things you learned that I did not already know, and I warn you that I know a great deal." It was the kind of game the boys loved, and they were extraordinary at it, in different and complementary registers. Draco worked the surface. He knew every name, every alliance, every feud, the entire genealogy of the room, and he could move through it, dropping the right word to the right person with the fluency of a child raised to it. Harry worked underneath. He watched the things people did when they thought no one important was looking, because he had spent 6 years being no one important, and had learned that the truest information is what people let slip around the help. Together they saw the whole of a room that most adults saw only half of. Harry himself was the sensation of the evening, and he had known he would be, and had decided how to handle it with a care that would have unsettled his foster mother had she known its source. Boy Who Lived raised Malfoy. It was the scandal and fascination of the decade, and the hall turned toward him when he entered like flowers toward a hard light. He could feel the whole room wanting something from him. The old dark families wanting reassurance that he was theirs now, the fence-sitters wanting to know which way to line, the few timid light sympathizers present wanting to believe he was still, secretly, salvageable. Every faction in the room had written him apart, exactly as the books had. He played none of the parts. That was the thing Narcissa watched him do across the crowded hall and understood, with a flush of something between pride and unease, that no one had taught him. He had worked it out himself. He did not reassure the dark families or disappoint them. He did not lean for the fence-sitters. He was warm and unreadable and precisely courteous to everyone, and he answered every probing question with a question of his own, so that person after person came away from a conversation with Harry Potter, convinced they had charmed him and unable, afterward, to say a single thing he had actually committed to. He gave the room a mirror and let each faction see in it what they wished, and he gave away nothing, 10 years old, in a hall full of the most practiced liars in Britain. Where? Narcissa murmured to Severus, who had come because she had asked him to and stood at the wall radiating the social warmth of a gravestone. Did he learn that? In the cupboard, said Severus, who had stopped being surprised by the answer because it was always the answer. A child who survives by reading dangerous adults and giving them nothing to punish does not unlearn it because the adults stop being dangerous. He has merely discovered that the skill which kept him alive can also be used to win. He watched the boy disengage from a Selwyn and turn unhurried to a Greengrass. It is a very great deal more frightening in a warm room than it ever was in a cupboard. Look at them all. Not one of them knows they are being read. They think they are reading him. Before the test, the boys gave Narcissa more than the 3 things she had asked for, and 2 of them mattered. The first was the ministry men. Cornelius Fudge had come not yet minister but climbing, and surrounded by the loose cluster of ambition that gathers around a man on his way up. Draco named them all. Harry watched them and reported afterward what Draco had missed. They don't actually like Fudge, Harry said. They follow him because he's going to win, not because they think he's good. Watch them when he tells a joke. They laugh half a second too late every time because they're watching each other to see how much to laugh. That's not a loyal circle, that's a queue. Every one of them is waiting to find out whether there's a better horse. He had tucked the observation away with satisfaction. Father should know that. A man whose own people are a queue can be turned. You just have to be the better horse. The second was the Greengrasses, and the Greengrasses were the discovery of the night. They were an old house, as old as the Malfoys, and they had done the one thing almost no house of their standing had managed during the war: nothing. They had not marched with the Dark Lord, and they had not stood against him. They had withdrawn to their estates, kept their heads down, declined every overture from both sides, and emerged with their fortune, their dignity, and their daughters intact while houses on both sides burned. The pureblood hall regarded them with a wary respect that was almost resentment, the resentment the committed feel toward the ones who refused to choose and turned out to be right. Cyrus Greengrass had brought his elder daughter, Daphne, who was Harry's age and had her father's gift for stillness. She stood at the edge of the dancing, watching the room with an expression Harry recognized, because it was his own, the expression of a person reading the map rather than dancing on it. He went and stood beside her, and for a while neither said anything, which was its own kind of conversation. "You're doing it too," Harry said eventually. "Watching, not the dancing, the other thing." "My father says a Greengrass dances last," Daphne said without turning her head. "He says we watch which way the floor leans before we put our weight anywhere. It's how we still have a house." She glanced at him then, cool and assessing. "You're supposed to be the light's lost lamb raised by wolves, but you're not dancing either. You've talked to 30 people tonight and promised nothing to any of them. I've been counting, so which is it, Potter, lamb, or wolf?" "Neither," said Harry. "Same as you." "I'm the one who watches which way the floor leans." He met her look and held it. "Your house spent a war refusing to be a piece in anyone's game, and you came out with everything while the players lost their sons. I think that's the cleverest thing any house in this room has ever done, and I think nobody here will say so because they're embarrassed they didn't do it themselves. When I'm older, I'd like to talk to your father about how you managed it. And to you, probably, since you'll be the one who decides it next." Daphne Greengrass looked at the boy for a long moment, and something flickered behind her stillness that might, in a few years, become an alliance. "You're not what they said," she said. "Nobody ever is," said Harry. "That's the first thing the parties teach you." And he bowed to her, correct and unmocking, and went back to the room, and added the Greengrasses to a map he was building in his head that was not the map his mother had asked for, and not the map his father thought he was drawing, a map of the houses that could be moved, and the houses that, like his own and Daphne's, did the moving. The test came at the height of the evening, and it came from Thoros Knott, who was old and clever and faithful, and who had decided to find out, in front of witnesses, exactly what the Malfoys had made. He was the kind of man who had served the Dark Lord out of conviction rather than convenience, and who had spent the years since the fall keeping the faith quietly and waiting, and he did not approve of the Malfoy experiment, because he believed the Potter boy was an abomination dressed as an asset, and he meant to expose the rot at a moment that would do the Malfoys the most damage. He drew Harry into a knot of senior pureblood men near the hearth, Yaxley, a Carrow, old Knott himself, and he asked his question with the silk of a man who has placed a knife under a napkin. "They say you remember nothing of that night," Knott said. The night you survived, a pity. I should have liked to know what you make of it now you are old enough to understand what it was. The man whose downfall you are famous for. Tell us, Mr. Potter, here among friends who knew him, do you hate him? The Dark Lord, the maker of your fame. Do you hate the man who killed your parents? The knot went quiet. It was a perfect trap, and Harry, 10 years old, saw every wall of it in the half-second before he answered. If he said, yes, I hate him, he declared himself the light's weapon, Dumbledore's blade, the enemy of every man in this circle, and he handed not the proof that the Malfoys had failed. If he said, no, I do not hate him, he became, before witnesses, a monster, a boy who did not even resent his own parents' murderer, and not had what he needed to whisper that the Potter boy was unnatural, that the Malfoys had raised something wrong. There was no true answer that was not also a surrender. Not had built it that way. He was very good. Harry was better. I was 15 months old, he said, and his voice was clear and carried, pitched to be heard by the listening hall and not only the circle, because he had learned that a trap set in public is best sprung in public. I don't remember the man at all. I can't hate someone I never met any more than you can hate a stranger in a story. What I have instead is a fact. My mother died standing between me and a wand. She didn't have to. She could have stepped aside. She chose to die so that I would live, and her choice is the only reason any of us are standing in this beautiful hall having this conversation. He let that land, and he saw around the circle the faces of men who had themselves had mothers, who could not quite sneer at a mother's death without diminishing their own. So I don't spend my feeling on hating a man I never knew. I spend it being worth what she paid. That's what I make of that night, Mr. Knott. My mother thought I was worth dying for. I intend to prove her right. I'd have thought men who value blood as much as you do would understand a debt to one's mother better than anyone. It was flawless, and it was devastating, because it refused both walls of the trap and built a third thing entirely. It neither embraced the Dark Lord nor the light, but stood on a value the whole room shared, and dared anyone to argue against it. To attack it, Knott would have to argue that a mother's sacrifice meant nothing, in a hall full of purebloods who had built their entire creed on the sanctity of blood and lineage and the bonds of family. He could not, no one could. The trap had closed on its setter. And then Draco, who had been standing at his brother's shoulder reading the circle, delivered the killing line with the offhand cruelty of a boy who had been raised to it, smiling pleasantly at old Knott. It's a wonderful question, sir, though. Whether you can hate someone you never met. He took a sip of his punch. Theodore says you ask him the same sort of thing about the Dark Lord at supper. He says you talk about the old days a great deal. He finds it, a pause, perfectly judged, tiring. But then sons do find their fathers tiring, don't they? I'm sure mine finds me a great trial. And he beamed, and the circle laughed, because Draco had just done to Knott in public what Knott had tried to do to Harry, exposed him lightly, as a man whose own son was bored of his loyalties, and had done it while seeming to make a joke at his own expense. Yaxley actually clapped Harry on the shoulder. The Carrow chuckled. And Thoreau's Knott, outmaneuvered by two 10-year-olds in front of the men he had meant to impress, smiled a smile with no warmth in it and withdrew, and understood as he went that he had badly underestimated what the Malfoys had built, and that he would need to think again, and more carefully, about the boy with the green eyes who had just refused his trap and the fair one who had sprung it back on him. Narcissa, across the hall, had seen the whole thing without hearing a word of it, and she set down her glass very carefully, because her hands had gone unsteady with something that was not quite fear and not quite triumph. She had set out to raise a weapon that would be loyal to her house. She was beginning to suspect she had raised something that would be loyal to no house but its own, and that it might in time be far more dangerous than anything Dumbledore or the Dark Lord had ever imagined, because it could not be bought, frightened, or fooled, and it was only 10. Andromeda came to tea 2 days after the ball and brought her daughter, and the visit cracked something in the house that had been closed since before the boys were born. It was not an easy visit. 15 years do not dissolve over scones, and there was a stiffness at the start. 2 sisters who had been raised in the same cold house and chosen opposite exits from it, sitting across a table trying to find the children they had been. But Nymphadora Tonks was 17 and entirely without stiffness, and she broke the ice the only way she knew how, which was to change her nose into a pig's snout to make the boys laugh, and then her hair from brown to violent pink, and then on request into a passable imitation of Lucius's sleek blonde, which made even Severus's mouth twitch and made the boys adore her instantly and completely. You're a metamorph, Magus, Harry said, delighted, because he had read about them and never met one. That's incredibly rare. You could be anyone. You could rob Gringotts. I could, Tonks agreed cheerfully, restoring her own face, but the goblins would feed me to something, so I'm going to be an Auror instead, which is basically the same job, but they pay you and you're allowed to keep your hands. She grinned at him. You're not what I expected, you know. I was told the Malfoys had the famous Harry Potter, and I thought you'd be all. She puffed herself up into an aristocratic sneer, her face actually shifting to sell it, but you're just a kid who likes books. Bit of a letdown, honestly. I came for a tragic hero. Sorry, said Harry, grinning back. I can sneer if you want. I've been practicing. I do it at parties. He does, Draco confirmed gravely. He's very good. He sneered at a whole hall full of people on Saturday, and they all thought he was being charming. And the table laughed, even the two sisters, and in the laughing something thawed, and Andromeda looked at her younger sister over the heads of the children and said quietly under the noise, You really did change, sissy. I didn't believe the letters. I thought you wanted something, but you really did. And Narcissa, who had spent her life being the sister who never broke a rule, said, A child showed me what the rules cost. I should have seen it when they cost you. I'm sorry it took me so long, and I'm sorry it took a stranger's son instead of my own sister. And Andromeda reached across 15 years and took her hand, and that was all, and it was enough, and Ted Tonks was invited for the next visit, a muggle born by marriage at a Malfoy table, which would have been unthinkable a year before and was now simply, quietly true. Severus watched Tonks make the boys laugh and watched Harry laugh without checking first whether it was allowed, and his closed face did the thing it did only when he forgot to guard it, and Narcissa, who missed nothing, saw him see Lily in her son's open delight and look away, and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that he would thank her for. After the guests had gone, Lucius poured Severus a drink he had not asked for and laid out, for the first time aloud, the shape of the thing he had been building in silence for 4 years. You saw it tonight, Lucius said. The Not Boy's father came to break us and left broken. The whole hall watched a potter refuse a trap that would have destroyed a grown man. Do you understand what we have, Severus? Do you understand what is sleeping in the east wing? He turned his glass in the firelight. When the Dark Lord returns, and he will return, you have felt the mark as I have. It is not the scar of a dead thing. He will come back to a world that wrote him off. He will need to know who kept the faith, and I will bring him the one prize no one else can, the boy who unmade him, raised loyal, raised ours, delivered willingly to his side. The boy who lived, turned. There is no gift in the world that buys a man more than that. We will not merely survive his return, Severus. Stand at his right hand, because we will have given him the thing he wants most in all the world. Severus drank, because drinking gave him somewhere to put his face. And if the boy will not be given, he said, he is not a cup of wine, Lucius. He is a person, and an unusually difficult one. You have spent 4 years teaching him to think for himself. That is not a quality that makes a man easy to hand over. He will do as his family asks. We are his family. We saved him. Lucius said it with the serene confidence of a man who had never in his life been refused by someone he had bought. Gratitude is the most reliable leash there is. He owes us everything, and he knows it, and a debt like that does not argue. Severus said nothing, because there was nothing to say that Lucius would hear. He was thinking of the swept gray room behind the boy's eyes, the fortress no Legilimens could enter, the child who had refused 30 overtures in one evening and committed to none. He was thinking that Lucius had mistaken the most dangerous mind he had ever taught for a debt that would pay itself on command, and that the mistake would someday cost the house of Malfoy more than Lucius could imagine. And he was thinking this last he buried deepest beneath the swept room of his own mind, where neither Dumbledore's gentleness nor the Dark Lord's fury had ever reached, that he hoped Lucius was wrong. That he hoped when the plans came due and the men reached for the peace, Lily's son would prove ungivable, unleashable, his own. That for once the boy with her eyes would not be a weapon in another man's hand, as his mother had never been, as Severus himself had been all his life. You are very quiet, Lucius observed. I am tired, said Severus, and you have given me a great deal to think about, and the boy brews better than you will ever know, which is the only opinion of him I am prepared to offer at midnight. He set down the glass. Good night, Lucius. Mind your prize. Prizes that think for themselves have a habit of deciding what they are worth and to whom. And he went out into the cold, his face a closed door, and did not look back, and Lucius poured himself another drink and dreamed of the right hand of a returning king, and never once suspected that the man who had just left him hoped, with everything he had left to hope with, that the whole magnificent plan would fail. The boys took the whole of it apart that night in Harry's room by the fire, because they always took the day apart together before they slept. It was where their real education happened, the part neither parent taught. Nott was trying to ruin us, Harry said. He was on the windowsill, his usual perch, with Father's allies watching. He wanted to make Father look like a fool who'd raised the light's pet. I know, I nearly hit him. Draco was sprawled on the rug, but you didn't need me to. You did the mother thing and the whole circle just folded. How did you know that would work? Because they believe in blood, Harry said. It's the only thing they all believe in, so you can't beat them by arguing against it. You beat them by using it. I made my mother's death about blood, about the bond between a mother and a son, and once it was about blood, they couldn't sneer at it without sneering at themselves. It was quiet a moment watching the fire, which still burned faintly green at its heart in this house, always green now. That's the thing I keep noticing, Draco, about all of them, not Yaxley, the whole hall. They're not strong. They look strong, but they all believe the same handful of things, and once you know the things, you can move them around like the chess pieces. Father moves them. Dumbledore moves them from the other side. They're all just being moved. Draco rolled onto his back and considered the ceiling. Including us, he said. Father thinks he's moving us. You know that, right? The lessons, the ball, the broom, all of it. He's training you up to be something. A prize. He writes letters about you. I've seen them. The Potter boy's promising disposition. He said it without rancor. He had grown up inside his father's schemes and did not resent them, but he was not blind to them either, and he had decided some time ago that his loyalty to his brother sat above his loyalty to his father's plans, even if he had never said so aloud. He's got a whole plan for you, for when the Dark Lord comes back, he's going to hand you over like a trophy and say, "Look what I made." The fire cracked. Harry did not look surprised, because he had read the same letters in the same study on the same afternoons Lucius taught him to read everything. "I know," he said. "Dumbledore's got a plan for me too. Snape thinks I don't know about that one, but I worked it out. There's a reason a man hides a baby with people who hate him, and it isn't love. They both want to use me. Father wants to give me to the Dark Lord. Dumbledore wants to point me at him. Two plans, opposite directions, same piece." He turned from the window and looked at his brother, and his face had the still, considering look that Narcissa would have recognized and that Lucius, fatally, never did. "I've been thinking about it for a while, about what happens when I'm grown and the plans come due and everyone reaches for the piece at the same time. And I'm not going to be a piece," Harry said. He said it quietly, without drama, which made it more frightening, not less. "Not showed me tonight. The whole hall showed me. They can all be moved because they all want the same simple things and they're all afraid of the same simple things. And that means a person who isn't moved, who wants something they haven't got a name for yet, who isn't afraid of the things they're afraid of, that person can move them instead. I've spent my whole life being moved, by the Dursleys, by the books, by Father's plan and Dumbledore's plan. I'm done. When the plans come due, I'm not going to pick a side, Draco. I'm going to take the board." It should have sounded like a child's boast. It did not, because Draco had just watched his 10-year-old brother unmake a master schemer in front of a hostile hall without breaking courtesy, and because he knew, in the place where brothers know things that Harry did not boast, that Harry said less than he meant rather than more. He sat up. "On your own," Draco said. "Against Father and Dumbledore and the Dark Lord and the whole lot of them. That's mad. That's completely mad. You can't take the board on your own." "No," Harry agreed, and the ghost of the chessboard smile came back, the one that had started everything. "Which is why I'm telling you. I told you years ago in the garden, I choose you to be my brother and I'll stand at your back even when you're wrong, and nobody can ever make me stop." He held out his hand, palm up, the old offer, the one that was never a grab. "I can't take the board alone. I can take it with you, so that's the question, really. Are you in, or are you going to be a prize in your father's plan with me?" Draco looked at the offered hand. He thought about it for exactly as long as it took to be sure he meant it, which was not very long, because he had bloodied his knuckles over this boy at 6 and had not changed his mind since. "I'm in," he said, and took his brother's hand, and the two heirs of the most dangerous house in Britain shook on it by a green-hearted fire, 10 years old, and began, though no one else in the world yet knew it, not Lucius, not Dumbledore, not the thing waiting in the dark to return, to plan the remaking of a war that everyone else thought they already understood. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. The establishment reacts. For 4 years, Albus Dumbledore tried to get the boy back, and for 4 years the oldest magic in Britain told him no. He had begun within days of the ward's collapse, quietly, as he did everything. He had sent Arabella Figg to walk past number 4 and report. She reported that the boy was gone, that the Dursleys would say only that they came and took the freak away with papers, that the cupboard under the stairs had been converted to store the vacuum cleaner. He had checked the ministry's guardianship records and found to his cold surprise that there was nothing irregular to find. The transfer of custody was registered, witnessed, sealed, and stamped with a Gringotts attestation he had not known existed and could not, when he investigated it, find any legal mechanism to challenge. He had gone himself to the Hall of Records and read the watching interest contract, and understood within 3 paragraphs that he was looking at a wall. It was the wall that troubled him most. Albus Dumbledore had spent a long life learning that almost every wall had a door if you were patient and clever and willing to do what others would not. This wall had no door. The watching interest predated the Wisengamot. It could not be overruled by the Wisengamot. It had been invoked by the lawful proxy of a noble house over a kinsman of the blood. The kinship was real, documented, ancient, the Black Potter line through Doria, and no amount of argument could make Harry Potter less related to the Blacks than he provably was. And the boy had been sealed into the house by the hearth right, the old claiming, which meant the magic of the place itself now recognized him as kin, and Albus, who understood that magic better than any living man, knew that to break it he would have to break something so deep that the breaking would do more harm than the wrong he meant to right. He had built the boy's whole purpose on protection. He had let a child suffer in a cupboard because he believed the suffering bought a shield. And the suffering had bought nothing because the shield had been taken, and the child with it, by the one move he had never wargamed, that someone in the old families would care. That was the part he returned to in the long nights, turning it over. He had assumed cruelty. He had built his entire calculation on the assumption that no pureblood of Narcissa Malfoy's standing would look at the orphaned symbol of the light and feel anything but distaste. He had been so certain that the boy was safe precisely because no one on the other side would want him, that he had never imagined the one thing that had actually happened, that a cold woman had looked into a cupboard and discovered she was not as cold as her whole life had taught her to be. He had failed to account for mercy in his enemies. It was, he would admit to himself in the worst of the nights, the most damning failure of his career, and it told him something about the shape of his own heart that he did not enjoy learning. So he waited and watched, and as the boy approached 11 and the Hogwarts letter that would have to be sent, he made his moves, because a man does not surrender a war he has been planning for a decade without testing every wall for the door he cannot see. He sent Minerva first because Minerva was honest and formidable and could not be accused of subterfuge, and because he wanted, before anything else, an honest eye on the inside of that house. Narcissa received her in the blue drawing room alone with tea, as one receives an opponent one respects. Minerva McGonagall sat very straight and did not touch the tea and came directly to her point, because she had never in her life learned to do otherwise. I will not pretend this is a social call, Mrs. Malfoy. I taught Lily Evans and James Potter. I held their son the night they died, and I have spent 10 years believing him safe, and I have lately learned that safe was a word doing a great deal of work it could not support, and that the safety in question was a cupboard. Her mouth was a thin line. I have come to see the boy. Not to take him, I am told, repeatedly and by people I trust, that he cannot be taken, that the law and the magic are against it, and I have stopped wasting Albus's hopes on that point. I have come to see with my own eyes whether he is well, because if a Malfoy has rescued Lily's son from a cupboard only to raise him in a colder one, I should like to know it, and I am old enough and stubborn enough that you will not put me off with charm. I would not insult you by trying, said Narcissa. You may see him. I will tell you only one thing first, Professor, because you knew his mother and I did not, and you are owed it. When I found him, he weighed less than my son had at 3. He had 2 broken bones set crooked by no one and scars from a stove and a belt, and he had been taught to fold himself small at the sound of a man's voice. He did not cry when I took him out of the cupboard because he had learned that crying was dangerous. He cried for the first time 3 months later, when he finally understood that what had been done to him was not normal and not deserved. That is the child your safe placement produced. I am aware you did not choose it. I am aware Albus Dumbledore chose it and told you it was protection. I would ask you to hold on to that knowledge while you look at the boy I have spent 4 years rebuilding, because I think you will find the comparison instructive. She rang for Harry, and Harry came. He was nearly 11 now, and he came into the room with the ease of a boy entirely at home in his own life, well-fed, well-dressed, upright, the green eyes clear and direct and entirely without the flinch. He greeted Minerva with a bow that was correct without being cold and said, "Professor McGonagall. My mother taught me that you were the finest transfiguration mind of your generation and that you turned down the chance to do less honest, better paid work a dozen times because you believed teaching mattered more. I've wanted to meet you. Most of the adults I meet chose the money." He smiled and it reached his eyes. "Thank you for coming to check on me. Not many people would have." Minerva McGonagall, who had braced herself for a cold little aristocrat, for a broken thing in fine robes, for 100 grim possibilities, looked at the warm, poised, frighteningly perceptive child in front of her and felt the entire structure of her dread come apart. She asked him questions, careful ones, the questions of a teacher who knows how to find the cracks, and he answered them with a candor that had nothing to hide and an intelligence that took her breath. She asked whether he was happy. Yes, and then because he was honest, happier than I have any memory of being, which is a low bar, but they keep raising it. She asked gently whether he was lonely. He looked surprised and said, "I have a brother," as though that settled the entire question, which she would understand later it did. When he had gone, Minerva sat for a long moment with her cold tea, and then she said in a voice that had lost all its starch, "He is more like her than anyone I have ever met, not in looks. In the way of being decent without being soft. Lily was the only student I ever taught who could be kind and ruthless in the same breath. He has it. You gave it back to him, or you grew it, I cannot tell which." She rose. "I came here prepared to disapprove of you, Mrs. Malfoy, for the rest of my life. I find I cannot. I find I am instead going to go back to Albus Dumbledore and tell him that the boy is the best-raised child I have met in 40 years of raising children, and that he should leave well enough alone, and that I will say so to his face and to the Wisengamot if it comes to that." She paused at the door. "I do not like your husband, I do not like your politics, but you did the one thing Albus would not, which was to put the child before the war. I am old enough to know how rare that is. Good day." And she went and reported exactly what she had said she would, and Albus Dumbledore lost his most honest ally in the matter of Harry Potter, because she had gone to find a victim and found a son. The Ministry challenge came next, and it was the cleverest of Dumbledore's moves, and it died in committee on a Thursday. He did not bring it himself, that was the cleverness. He had it raised by a sympathetic member as a question of child welfare, a general inquiry into the guardianship of war orphans, framed so reasonably that to oppose it was to seem to oppose the welfare of children, with the Potter case as its unspoken center. Had it reached the floor, it would have forced an examination of the custody, a parade of testimony, a chance to muddy the clear water of the law with the dirty water of politics, and Dumbledore was a master of the dirty water. It did not reach the floor because Lucius Malfoy had spent 15 years buying the committee that decided what reached the floor. He did it without raising his voice, which was his gift, the same gift his wife had. A word to Fudge, who owed him and wanted to keep owing him because Lucius's gold flowed only to men who stayed useful. A reminder to 3 committee members of favors past and favors possible. A quiet, devastating memorandum, drafted by Narcissa and signed by a healer of St. Mungo's and a notary of the Department of Magical Law, detailing the condition in which the boy who lived had been found in his Dumbledore-arranged placement. A document that made it abundantly clear that any public inquiry into the guardianship of Harry Potter would result not in the embarrassment of the Malfoys, but in the catastrophic embarrassment of Albus Dumbledore, who had placed a national hero in a cupboard and left him to starve for 6 years. The committee read the memorandum and understood at once that the question was radioactive, that whoever brought the Potter custody to the floor would be the one holding it when it exploded, and that it would not explode on the Malfoys. The inquiry was tabled, pending further information, and quietly never untabled. Dumbledore's cleverest move died without a vote, killed by the one weapon he could not answer, the truth of what he had done. "You enjoyed that," Narcissa observed to her husband that evening. "I enjoyed it enormously," Lucius agreed, pouring. "Do you know, Narcissa, I opposed this entire enterprise 4 years ago. I called the boy the most dangerous object in Britain." He raised his glass to her. "I find I must concede the argument with interest. He has made us untouchable. Dumbledore cannot move against the boy without confessing the cupboard, and he cannot confess the cupboard without ending himself. We have wrapped the most powerful wizard in Britain in his own conscience, and there is nothing he can do about it. It is the most elegant thing I have ever been part of, and it was your doing, and I have never found you more attractive." "Restrain yourself," said Narcissa, but she was pleased, and she let it show, because she had learned in 4 years that a marriage of strategists could afford, occasionally, a moment of being simply on the same side. It would not last the year, that ease, but it was real while it lasted, and she let herself have it. Narcissa told the boys a week in advance that Dumbledore was coming, because she had learned never to deny them preparation, and the 2 of them took the news up to Harry's room and war-gamed it the way other boys their age planned a game of Quidditch. "He'll apologize," Harry said. "He was on the windowsill. That's the move. I've read everything about him. He's not a liar. That's what makes him dangerous. He'll tell the truth about the cupboard, and he'll mean it, and he'll do it to bind me." An honest apology is a hook. You feel like you owe the person who's brave enough to admit they wronged you. He's going to use his own guilt as a rope. "So don't take it," said Draco, sprawled on the rug. "Throw it back." "No, that's what he'll expect from a Malfoy, cold, ungracious, the spoiled heir sneering at the great man. If I do that, he wins, because then McGonagall and everyone hears that the Light's lost lamb has been turned into a nasty little snob, and the cupboard gets forgotten and the story becomes about how the Malfoys ruined me." Harry shook his head. "I have to do the opposite. I take the apology. I thank him sincerely because it costs me nothing and it disarms him completely. He's braced for hostility, and I give him grace. And then, while he's off balance from being thanked, I tell the truth about what he actually did, not angry, calm, because anger sounds like a wounded child and calm sounds like a verdict. You can argue with a wounded child, you can't argue with a verdict." Draco sat up, interested, because this was the game they both loved best, and then he asks the real question, whether you're his. "Right, and here's the part that matters, Draco, so tell me if it's wrong." Harry turned from the window. "I don't say no. If I say I'll never fight the Dark Lord, I'm not your weapon. Then I've told the whole world I won't fight the man who murdered my parents, and the Dark's faithful love me and the Light hates me, and I've picked a side by accident, the wrong one, and for the wrong reason. So I don't say no. I say I might fight him. But only if I choose it, as a person, not as anyone's sword. That keeps both doors open. The Light can't call me the enemy because I haven't refused. The Dark can't call me theirs because I haven't agreed. I stay exactly where you and I decided we're going to live, in the middle, unowned, with everyone needing us and no one holding us." Draco thought about it, hunting for the flaw, because that was his job in these sessions, to be the wall Harry's plans were thrown against. "Father," he said, "Father will be in the room. If you say no one's weapon, not yours and not theirs, with Father standing right there, you're telling him in front of Dumbledore that his whole plan is dead. He'll be furious. It'll start a fight between him and Mother that," he stopped because he had followed it through, the way Harry had taught him to follow things through, "that you want. You want it to happen in front of Dumbledore, because then it's done. Father can't pretend the plan's alive anymore, not after he's heard you kill it out loud, and Mother gets to win the argument she's been having with him quietly for years, all at once, with witnesses. You're not just answering Dumbledore. You're using Dumbledore's visit to finish the war inside our own house." Harry smiled, the chessboard smile, the one that meant his brother had seen the whole board. "I told you I couldn't do this without you," he said. "Yes, that's the move." One conversation, 3 problems solved. Dumbledore learns I'm not his, Father learns I'm not his trophy, and Mother gets the fight she needs to win on the night I make sure she can't lose it. He paused, and the smile faded into something more careful. "But I need you for the part that isn't strategy. When I say it, when I look at Father and tell him I'm no one's weapon, he's going to look at you, to see whose side you're on. And what you do in that second decides everything about how we live for the next 10 years. So I need to know now, before the room, before it's real. When your father looks at you to see if you'll choose him or me." "You," said Draco without a flicker before Harry had finished the sentence. "Obviously you. I bloodied my hand for you when I was 6, you idiot. I'm not going to flinch at 11 because Father gives me a look. Let him look. I'll be standing next to you and I'll be bored like it was never even a question because it was never a question." He lay back down on the rug. "Now stop checking. It insults us both. Tell me the rest of the lines. I want to hear the bit about the sword in the drawer again. That one's good. He's going to hate that one." And they went over it line by line, 2 boys rehearsing the dismantling of the most powerful wizard in Britain as though it were school recitation, until they both had it by heart. And when Dumbledore came a week later and the room held its breath, every devastating thing the boy said with such perfect calm had been written, weighed, and rehearsed in advance, by him and by his brother on a windowsill by a green fire, which was the thing none of the grown players ever understood about Harry Potter. Not Dumbledore and not Lucius and not the thing waiting in the dark. They kept mistaking his composure for a gift. It was preparation. He simply did his planning where they could not see it, with the one person in the world he trusted entirely, and walked into every room already knowing how it ended. Dumbledore came himself in the spring, and Narcissa let him in because she had decided long ago that when he came, and she had always known he would come, she would not bar the door. She would open it wide and let him see exactly what he had lost, and let the boy see exactly what he had been saved from. There was a lesson in it for everyone, and Narcissa Malfoy never wasted a lesson. He came alone in robes the color of a storm cloud, and he was older than his portraits and gentler than his reputation, and the most dangerous thing that had ever crossed the manor's threshold. And Narcissa received him in the long drawing room with Lucius at one side, and at the other the boy. She had thought hard about whether to have Harry present. She had decided yes, for reasons she gave no one, because the boy had a right to look at the architect of his cupboard, and because she trusted him at nearly 11 to look at Albus Dumbledore and not be moved by him, which was more than she could say for most grown wizards. "Narcissa," said Dumbledore, and his eyes were kind and terribly sad. "Lucius." And he turned to the boy, and something moved in the old face that was, Narcissa thought, entirely genuine, which was what made him dangerous, that his feeling was real even when his purpose was ruthless. "Harry, you have your mother's eyes. I have wanted to tell you that for a very long time." "People keep telling me," Harry said. "It's the first thing everyone says. I've started to think they say it because it's the only thing they know about me that's true, and they reach for it because everything else they think they know, they got from a book." He looked at the old man with a calm that had no hostility in it and no warmth either. The swept gray room turned outward. "You're Albus Dumbledore. You're the one who put me with the Dursleys." The room went very still. Lucius's eyes flicked to his wife. Narcissa did not move. "I am," said Dumbledore, and to his credit he did not look away. "I will not lie to you, Harry, because I think you would know and because you have been lied to enough. I placed you with your aunt's family. I believed it would protect you. There was an old magic in your mother's sacrifice, a protection that lived in her sister's blood, and I believed that while you could call that house home, no follower of the man who killed your parents could touch you there. I believed the protection was worth a great deal. The old voice did not quite break, but it bent. I was wrong about the price. I told myself I did not know what was happening in that house. The truth is that I did not ask because I was afraid of the answer, and a man who does not ask because he fears the answer is responsible for the answer all the same. I am sorry, Harry, it is not enough, but it is true." It was, Narcissa would reflect, a masterful apology because it was sincere, and sincerity was the last weapon she had expected him to bring. A lesser man would have justified the cupboard. Dumbledore confessed it fully, and in confessing it reached for the one thing that might still bind the boy to him, the bond of a wrong honestly owned. She watched her son receive it and waited, with a tightness in her chest she did not show, to see what 4 years of her raising would do against 60 years of Albus Dumbledore's craft. Harry was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Thank you for saying that. I think you mean it. I've gotten good at telling." He folded his hands behind his back, an unconscious echo of Lucius. "But I want to tell you something too, and I want you to hear it the way you just made me hear you. Say you put me there for protection, maybe that's even half true. But you left me there for 6 years, and you never came, and you never checked, and you let me believe I was nothing and deserved the cupboard, and a man as clever as you doesn't fail to check on the most important child in Britain for 6 years by accident. You left me hungry on purpose, because a hungry boy is grateful, and a grateful boy is easy to point at things. You weren't raising me, Mr. Dumbledore. You were keeping me. Like a sword in an old cloth in a drawer until you needed it. Dumbledore said nothing. There was nothing he could say because it was true, and the boy had said it without heat, which made it unanswerable. Here's the part I think you came to find out, Harry went on, so I'll just tell you and save us both the dance. You want to know if I'm yours. If I'll grow up and do the thing you've been saving me for, whatever it is, and I know there's a thing I've known for years, you don't hide a baby with people who hate him because you love him. The answer is I don't know yet. I know there's something coming. I know the man who killed my parents isn't finished. I might even end up fighting him because from everything I've read he needs fighting, and I don't love him just because the people who raised me used to follow him. But I won't do it because you saved me, because you didn't, and I won't do it because I'm grateful, because I'm not, and I won't do it as your sword. If I ever face him, it'll be because I decided to as a person on my own 2 feet with my brother beside me and my eyes open, not as anybody's weapon, not yours and not theirs. A glance light at Lucius, who went very still. I've read all your plans, I've read everyone's. And I'm going to disappoint all of you in exactly the same way. I'm going to choose for myself. That's what she bought me when she stepped in front of the wand, not a destiny, a choice. I don't think you ever understood the difference. I think that's the whole reason you lost me. The fire burned green at its heart. Albus Dumbledore looked at the 11-year-old who had just laid out, with perfect clarity and perfect calm, the exact failure of a strategy the old man had nursed for a decade, and for the first time in a very long life Albus Dumbledore had absolutely nothing to say. He had come to recover a weapon, or failing that to bind it with gratitude, or failing that to at least take its measure. He had taken its measure. The measure was that the weapon was not a weapon, had never agreed to be a weapon, and had grown, in a house full of his enemies, into precisely the kind of free, clear-eyed, self-possessed person that Albus Dumbledore had spent his whole life telling himself he was protecting and had in fact been preventing. The Malfoys had not corrupted Lily's son. They had freed him. And in freeing him, they had done the one thing that defeated Albus Dumbledore completely, because there was no move against it. You cannot reclaim a sword that has decided it is a man. I see, Dumbledore said at last, very quietly. I came here, I think, still believing that I knew what was best for you. I find that I have been corrected. He looked at Narcissa, and there was something in the look that was almost respect and almost grief. You have raised him well, better than I would have. I did not think I would ever say that to you of all people in this house, of all houses. The world is stranger than my plans for it. He inclined his head to her and then gravely to the boy. Harry, if the day comes that you choose to fight and you find you want an ally who asks nothing of you but the truth, my door will be open and I will have learned by then not to mistake you for a sword. It is the only amends I have to offer. I hope I am given the chance to make it. And he turned and Narcissa walked him to the door herself, and at the threshold he paused and said, so low that only she could hear, guard him, Narcissa. Not from me, I am finished trying to use him. I am too old and too tired and too thoroughly beaten to begin again. Guard him from the other one. He is coming back. I have felt it as surely as your husband's mark has. And when he comes, that boy will be the center of everything, whether he chooses it or not, and he will need every wall this house can give him. I spent 10 years trying to keep him for the war. You spent 4 years making him strong enough to survive it. I begin to think yours was the better magic. And he went out into the spring evening alone, an old man who had outlived his certainties, and Narcissa stood in the doorway and watched him go and felt, to her surprise, no triumph at all, only the cold, clear understanding that the easy enemy had just bowed out and that the hard one had not yet arrived. The ease between her and Lucius did not survive the conversation that followed, as she had known it would not. That, said Lucius, when Dumbledore had gone and his voice had an edge she had not heard turned on her in years, was a catastrophe, and you arranged it. You let the boy declare independence from everyone, from Dumbledore, yes, very satisfying, but also from us, from me. Not as anybody's weapon, not yours and not theirs. He looked at me when he said it, Narcissa. In front of Albus Dumbledore, he announced that he does not consider himself ours to direct. Do you understand what you have built? You have spent 4 years and a fortune raising the perfect instrument, and then you taught it that it has no master. When the Dark Lord returns and I go to present him the boy who unmade him, what precisely am I to present? A child who has informed the most powerful wizard in Britain to his face that he is no one's weapon. Yes, said Narcissa. Yes, yes. That is exactly what you will have to present, Lucius, because that is what he is, and the sooner you make your peace with it, the longer you will live. She faced him fully. You still think he is a thing you can give away. He is not. He was never going to be. The moment you start trying to hand him to the Dark Lord against his will is the moment you lose him and lose Draco with him, because they are one creature now in every way that matters, and if you reach for one, the other reaches for his wand. You have not been watching them. I have. Your plan is dead, Lucius. It died tonight in public, and the kindest thing I can tell you is that it was always going to die, and that the only question left is whether you are wise enough to build a new plan around the boy who exists instead of clinging to the one who never did. And what plan is that? I don't know yet, neither do they entirely. But I know it will be theirs, not ours, and I know that our survival now depends on being useful to them rather than the other way round, and I know that this is not what you married me for, and I am sorry for it, and I would do every part of it again." She held his gaze. "I chose 4 years ago in a cupboard in Surrey. I chose the boy over the plan. I have not stopped choosing him since, and I am not going to start now because the Dark Lord might be displeased. You may stand with me, Lucius, or you may stand with your dead plan. But you will not make me choose between my sons and your ambition, because you already know how that ends. And so do I." Lucius Malfoy looked at his wife across the long drawing room, and she watched him understand fully and for the first time that the woman he had married had become someone he could no longer predict or direct, that the cold, biddable beauty of 20 years gone had been replaced by her own hand and a green-eyed child, with something he did not own and could not move. It frightened him. She saw it frighten him, and she saw him decide for now, for tonight, for as long as the arithmetic held, not to fight her, because Lucius Malfoy had always known better than to wage a war he could not win, and he could not win this one, and they both knew it. "We are not finished discussing this," he said. "No," she agreed. "I don't imagine we will be finished discussing it for years. But we are finished discussing it tonight, and I am going to go and say good night to my sons, both of whom are listening at the door as they have been for the entire conversation, because I raised them to gather information and they are very good at it." She raised her voice pleasantly. "Good night, boys. Bed. We will talk in the morning about everything you just overheard, and you will tell me 3 things you learned, and one of them had better be about your father's face." When Harry looked at him, there was a scuffle in the corridor and the sound of 2 boys failing to flee silently, and despite everything, despite the fracture opening in her marriage and the dead old man's warning and the dark thing stirring at the edge of the world, Narcissa Malfoy smiled. Severus came to her late after the house had gone quiet because he had been in the corridor too and had heard all of it. "He has made his choice then," Severus said, the boy, out loud, to Dumbledore's face and to Lucius's. He stood by the green fire and his closed face was, for once, openly troubled. "You understand what that means for me. I have spent 11 years balanced between 2 masters, telling each what the other needed me to tell him, and surviving in the gap. The boy has just announced that he will serve neither, which means the gap is closing. Sooner or later, Narcissa, the day will come when I cannot serve Dumbledore and protect that child both, or cannot serve the Dark Lord and protect him both, and I will have to choose in the open, and the choice will likely cost me my life, because a double agent who picks a side has spent the only thing that kept him breathing." "I know," said Narcissa. "I have known since the night you told me you loved his mother. So has he. I think he misses very little. So I will ask you the only question that matters, Severus, and you may answer it now or carry it until the day comes, when the gap closes, when you cannot serve them and save him both. Which do you choose?" Severus Snape looked into the green fire, the fire that had claimed Lily's son, that burned the color of Lily's eyes, that would burn that color as long as the boy lived under this roof, and he was quiet for a long time. And then he said, in a voice stripped of all its careful nothing, the truest thing he had said in 11 years. "Him. I choose him. I have been choosing him since the night I begged a man to save his mother and failed. I failed her. I will not fail him, whatever it costs, whoever I have to betray. When the gap closes, Narcissa, I will be standing on the boys' side of it, and they can do to me what they like." He turned from the fire. "I would be obliged if you did not tell him. Not yet. Let him think I am still the bitter man who teaches him potions and calls his best work adequate. He will need at least one person near him whose loyalty is a surprise when the time comes. Let me be the surprise." "He already knows," said Narcissa gently. "He has known for years. He told Draco. He said, 'Snape thinks I don't know he's on my side, so I let him think it because it makes him feel safe, and he's never felt safe in his whole life, and I'm not going to be the one who takes it from him.'" She watched the words go into Severus like the slow turning of a key. "He is protecting you, Severus. The boy you have been protecting in secret for 4 years has been protecting you back. That is what you saved when you chose him, not a weapon. A person who looks after the people who look after him, even when they think he can't see them do it. Lily's son, all the way through." And Severus Snape, who had not wept since the night Lily Evans died, turned his closed face to the green fire so that Narcissa would not see what it did. And Narcissa, who saw everything, looked away to let him have it, and neither of them spoke again, and the fire burned green between them. And somewhere above them 2 boys slept who had no idea yet how many people had quietly decided to die for them if it came to that, and how soon it might. 3 counties away in a circular office, an old man sat alone with a board he no longer commanded, and began slowly, painfully, to learn a new game, not how to wield the boy, but how to deserve someday to stand beside him. It was the hardest lesson of Albus Dumbledore's life, and he had very little time left to learn it, because the dark thing at the edge of the world had felt the boy too now, across all the miles, and it was coming home. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The war from within the Hogwarts letters came on the same morning, addressed in the same green ink, and the boys read them at the breakfast table with a calm that unsettled the house elves, who had expected celebration. "He had to send it," Harry said, turning the envelope over. "Dumbledore, by law every magical child gets the letter. He couldn't keep me out even if he wanted to, and he doesn't want to anymore. He said as much in the spring." He'd rather have me where he can watch me grow up than out here where he can't. He set the letter down. Which is fine, I'd rather be where I can watch him too. A school is just a smaller hall, Draco. Same game. More people our age, fewer of them already decided. That's the part that matters. Everyone here is set. At Hogwarts, half the board is still being painted. Lucius, who had been watching the boys read the letters with the particular tension of a man whose plans were about to leave his house and walk 100 miles north, set down his paper. You will be in Slytherin, he said. It was not quite a question. Both of you. The house has taken every Malfoy for 9 generations, and you, Mr. Potter, for all your peculiarities, have been raised to it. Slytherin is where the useful people are. It is where alliances are made that last a lifetime. You will go to Slytherin and you will build there, and you will not embarrass this family by being sordid somewhere sentimental. I'll go where it's useful to go, said Harry, which was not agreement, and Lucius, who had learned to hear the difference, frowned but let it pass, because the boy had not yet been wrong about what was useful. Diagon Alley gave Harry his wand, and the wand gave him a warning. Ollivander was a strange old man with pale eyes that saw too much, and he had measured Harry with a tape that moved on its own and handed him wand after wand that did nothing, until at last he went very still and fetched a long dusty box from the back of the shop with an expression of someone approaching a thing he half feared. I wonder, Ollivander murmured. Yes, why not an unusual pairing, but try this. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. Harry took it and warmth ran up his arm, and a fountain of silver and green sparks burst from the tip, and the shop seemed to brighten, and Draco said show off under his breath, and Ollivander did not smile. Curious, the old man said softly. Curious, curious. I remember every wand I have ever sold, Mr. Potter, every one, and it so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather sits in your wand gave one other feather, only one other. It is very curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. He reached out without permission and touched the air near Harry's forehead. 13.5 inches. I sold it myself a long time ago to a young man who became well. He did terrible things, Mr. Potter. Terrible, yes, but great. The wand chooses the wizard, and the brother of the wand that marked you has chosen you to carry its twin. We must expect great things from you. The man who gave you that scar did great and terrible things, and you will do great things too. I do not know if they will be terrible. The wand does not say. It says only that you and he are bound, you two, by more than a scar. The same heart sang into both your wands. I find I am uneasy. Mind how you go. Harry walked out into the sunlight of Diagon Alley holding a wand that was the twin of the one that had killed his parents, and he did not speak for a while, and Draco walked beside him and did not make him, because Draco knew when his brother was assembling something behind the swept gray wall. It means something, Harry said at last. Ollivander, he wasn't just being strange. The wands are brothers, mine and his. That's not coincidence, Draco. The same magic chose us both. Whatever's coming with the Dark Lord, it isn't going to be someone else's war that I happen to be standing near. It's mine. It was always going to be mine. We're connected, him and me, at a level I don't understand yet, and pretending otherwise would be the kind of comfortable lie Mother taught me never to build a life on. He looked at the wand, then put it carefully away. So we stop pretending we have all the time in the world. He's coming. Sooner than the grown-ups think, I'd bet, because the grown-ups are all waiting for a dramatic return, and the clever way back would be quiet. We build the board now, not someday, now. At school. We've got a year, maybe 2, before it gets real. That's how long we have to turn our whole generation into something that answers to us instead of to their parents' old loyalties. Because when he comes back, Draco, he's going to reach for the children of his old Death Eaters, Knot, Crabbe, Goyle, all of them, and call in the family debts. And if we've got there first, if those kids are ours before he asks, then the army he expects to inherit just isn't there. The chessboard smile. He's going to come home to a board we've already flipped. He just doesn't know it yet. Neither does Father. Let's keep it that way. The first bridge got built on the train, and Harry built it on purpose, though it looked like an accident. He and Draco had a compartment to themselves by virtue of being who they were, and they could have kept it that way the whole journey, 2 heirs in green-trimmed isolation. Instead, an hour out of London, Harry got up and went walking the length of the train, reading compartments the way he read ballrooms, and he found near the back a red-haired boy sitting alone with a smudge on his nose, a battered trunk, and the specific posture of a child braced for the year to confirm that he was poor and unremarkable and the 6th of his name to be neither. Harry sat down across from him without being invited. You're a Weasley, he said. I can tell from the hair and the hand-me-down robes, which means you've got a lot of brothers, which means you've spent your whole life being compared to people who came first, which is a thing I happen to know about from a different direction. He stuck out his hand. I'm Harry. I'm about to be the most stared-at person in that castle for reasons that have nothing to do with anything I actually did, which is its own kind of being compared to a person who isn't really you. So I thought I'd find the one person on this train who might understand that, and it turned out to be you. Want to share the misery? I've got a brother who'll be along in a minute, and he's insufferable, but he grows on you. Ron Weasley stared at the famous hand for a moment, suspicion and longing at war in his open face. "You're a Slytherin," he said. "I mean you will be. Everyone says the Malfoys raised you. My dad says the Malfoys are." He went red, sorry. "But everyone knows Slytherins are dark, evil, going to grow up to murder people." Harry kept his hand out. "Here's a question worth more than everything they'll teach us this year, Ron Weasley. Who told you that, and what did they get out of you believing it?" He watched the question land. "A hat's going to sort us in a few hours into boxes, and then the whole school's going to spend 7 years telling us the boxes are who we are. The only people that lie serves are the ones who need us fighting each other instead of noticing them. I'm not interested in the lie. I'm interested in whether you're decent and whether you're loyal, and I can already tell you're both because you went red when you insulted my family. A boy who feels bad about being rude is a boy worth knowing. So, friends, across the box, just to annoy everyone who needs us not to be." And Ron Weasley, who had got on the train expecting to be no one, shook the hand of the most famous boy in Britain and gained, in one stroke, a thing none of his 5 brothers had ever had, a friendship that the whole world would tell him was impossible. And the look on his face when Draco arrived and dropped into the seat beside Harry with a drawled, "Oh good. We're collecting Gryffindors now, Mother will be thrilled," and then, despite himself, started teaching Ron the rules of a card game. It was a look Harry would remember for the rest of his life, because it was the look of a wall coming down, and Harry had spent his childhood behind a wall, and there was nothing in the world he liked better than watching one fall. When the frizzy-haired girl came looking for a lost toad and stayed to correct Draco's pronunciation of a spell, the compartment held a Malfoy, a Potter, a Weasley, and a Muggle-born, laughing together before they had even reached the castle, and Harry sat in the middle of it and thought, there. That's the whole war right there in one compartment. He needs us sorted and afraid of each other, so we'll be the opposite. We'll be the thing that proves the sorting's a lie, and we'll do it laughing where everyone can see. The sorting hat offered Harry a choice, and the choice told the whole school who he was. He sat on the stool in the candlelit hall with 800 faces turned toward him, the boy who lived, the scandal of the decade, the light's lost child raised by the dark's first family, and the hat dropped over his eyes and spoke into his ear. "Ah," said the hat, "difficult, very difficult, plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either, a very good mind, trained, careful, a thirst to prove yourself and a great deal to prove it against. There's talent, oh yes, and a thirst that would do well in Slytherin. Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. And yet there's something the snakes won't quite understand in you, something your mother had. You do very well in Gryffindor, you know, you'd be loved there in a way you've never quite been loved. It's all here in your head, the wanting of it. I know Harry thought, I've thought about it, and it's a trap dressed as a gift, same as all of them. Put me in Gryffindor, I become the story everyone wants, the light boy who escaped the snakes, redeemed, returned to where he belongs. I lose my brother to another table. I lose the children I came here to reach, because Slytherin's the only house that'll never trust a Gryffindor Potter. And I let the world go on believing that Slytherin makes you bad and Gryffindor makes you good, which is the laziest lie this whole school is built on, and the most useful one to the people I mean to beat. No. Put me with the snakes, not because I'm one of them. Because I'm going to prove the house that the world calls villains can produce the thing the world least expects, and I can't prove it from the other table. Slytherin, and make it loud." The hat was quiet for a moment, and then with something that might have been respect, it said into his ear alone, "You could have been great in either, and you've chosen the harder greatness, to be good where no one believes good can grow. Your mother would be proud and a little frightened, which is the proper way for a mother to feel about a child like you. Very well, better be Slytherin." The hall did not cheer. The hall gasped and then fell into a roar of confused noise, because the boy who lived had just been sorted into the house of his parents' murderer, and half the school felt betrayed and the other half felt vindicated, and none of them understood that the boy on the stool had chosen it on purpose, with his eyes open, as the first move in a game none of them knew was being played. Draco joined him minutes later, Slytherin before the hat had fully touched his head, and slid onto the bench beside his brother, and the two of them sat at the green and silver table while the whole school stared. And Harry looked back at all of them with the swept calm of a boy entirely where he meant to be. And somewhere at the Gryffindor table a red-haired boy named Weasley stared hardest of all, and Harry noted him and smiled at him, and the red-haired boy, who had been raised to hate everything at the Slytherin table, found himself unable to work out why the famous Harry Potter was smiling at him as though they might be friends. They built it carefully over that first term, the thing that would matter. It began with their own house, because Slytherin was where the children of the faithful had been sent, and the children of the faithful were the army the Dark Lord would expect to inherit. Theodore Nott, whose father had tried to ruin them and whose son was tired of his father. Blaise Zabini, watchful and unaligned, the son of a mother who had survived 7 husbands and taught her boy to belong to no one. Daphne Greengrass, who had decided years before at a Yule ball that Harry Potter was worth watching, and her quiet younger sister Astoria. Even Crabbe and Goyle, who were not clever but were loyal, and whose loyalty Harry treated as worth having rather than worth mocking, which no one had ever done before and which bound them to him utterly. Harry's method was the opposite of his father's. Lucius bought allegiance or frightened it into being or inherited it. Harry simply paid attention. He learned what each of them actually wanted, not what their houses wanted, what they wanted, and he was the first person in their lives to ask. Not wanted to be respected for his mind, not his name. Harry respected his mind loudly in front of others, and not was his. Zabini wanted to be left genuinely free. Harry offered him alliance with no chain attached, an alliance he could walk away from at any time, which was the only kind Zabini would ever accept, and which, being unchained, he never walked away from. One by one, the children the Dark Lord was counting on quietly stopped belonging to their fathers, and started belonging to friendship that asked nothing of them but honesty and gave them in return the one thing 11-year-olds raised in cold houses had never had, someone who saw them. And then Harry did the thing that no one in Slytherin understood, and that changed everything. He reached across the hall. He made friends with Ron Weasley, and through Ron with a frizzy-haired Muggle-born girl named Granger, whose mind was the only one in the school that could keep pace with his own, and he did it openly, at the Slytherin table's horror, because Harry had understood something his whole world had missed. The war that was coming would not be won inside Slytherin. It would be won in the gap between the houses, the gap that Voldemort needed to stay wide, because his whole power came from the lie that the Slytherins and the rest could never stand together. Every bridge Harry built across that gap was a brick pulled out of the Dark Lord's foundation. So he built bridges in defiance of 4 years of pureblood training and the appalled whispers of his own house, and when Draco asked him why he was wasting his time on a blood traitor and a mudblood, and then immediately apologized because they did not use that word anymore, Harry's house had cured him of it, Harry said, because he wins if we stay sorted. The hat sorts us at 11, and we spend 7 years believing the sorting is who we are, and the whole time the only person it serves is the one who needs us divided. Granger is cleverer than both of us. Weasley would die for a friend without thinking about it, which is a kind of courage I don't have and want near me. If I only build inside Slytherin, I build half an army and the other half stays available for Dumbledore or for the Dark Lord to pick up. I don't want half. I want the whole board, Draco, and you don't get the whole board by playing the color you were handed. Draco thought about it, and then he went and made friends with Ron Weasley too, which cost him more than it cost Harry and which he therefore meant more, and the sight of a Malfoy and a Weasley laughing together in a corridor did more damage to the old order of things than a year of speeches could have, because it told every watching child that the walls they had been promised were permanent were not. Severus Snape was head of Slytherin House, which meant that for the first time in 4 years he could watch over the boy without anyone wondering why, and he used the cover ruthlessly. In public he was exactly what the school expected, cold, unfair, the terror of the dungeons, harder on his own Slytherins in front of others than any teacher had a right to be. In private he did the work no one saw. He knew within a week which 7th years had Death Eater fathers and ambitions to match, and he placed himself quietly between them and the first years who mattered. He intercepted 2 letters from home meant to instruct certain children in certain loyalties, and they never arrived. When an older boy named Flint thought to test the famous Potter with a corridor ambush dressed as house tradition, he found Professor Snape materializing from a shadow with a detention and a look that promised worse, and the tradition was not tested again. Harry saw all of it because Harry saw everything, and he never once acknowledged it because he understood the rules of the thing they were not saying. Snape needed to be the bitter man who hated him. The school needed to believe it, Dumbledore needed to believe it, the children of the faithful who reported home needed to believe it. So Harry let the man dock him points in front of the class and sneer at his potions and call his finest work adequate, and he played the resentful student to perfection, and the two of them maintained in front of the whole castle an elaborate public hostility that was, underneath, the most reliable alliance either of them had. Only once that term did the mask slip, and it slipped on purpose. Harry had stayed after a lesson on a pretext, and when the room was empty Snape said, without looking up from his marking, "You are watching Quirinus Quirrell." "Yes, sir, so am I." The quill stopped. "I will tell you a thing, Potter, once, and you will not ask me how I know it, and you will not act on it without me, and if you tell me you will obey me in this I will know whether you are lying, because I taught you to lie and I taught you well." He looked up, and his closed face was, for an instant, all the way open, and what was in it was fear, not for himself. "There is something wrong with that man. I have served the thing that is wrong with him. I would know its flavor anywhere, and I tasted it in that turban fool's classroom on the first day, and I have not slept properly since. Do you understand what I am telling you? Do you understand what may be wearing a teacher's face in this school?" "I understand exactly," said Harry quietly. "I've felt it too, the scar." Severus closed his eyes briefly. "Of course you have, the brother wands, of course." He set down the quill. "Then hear me. I cannot move against Quirrell openly. I am watched by Dumbledore, by the Dark Zone faithful, by everyone, and a head of house who attacks another teacher without proof ends his usefulness and his life in the same afternoon. But I am watching him every hour I can. And you, the fear sharpened, you are 11 years old, Harry, and whatever you are, whatever you have made of yourself, you are 11, and that thing in there once killed your mother in front of you. I have spent 10 years failing to keep her son safe at a distance. I will not do it at close range. Whatever you are planning, and you are planning, I can see it. You have her face when she was about to do something reckless and brilliant. You will bring me in before you act. Not Dumbledore, not your father, me. Promise me that much, and I will give you everything I know. And Harry looked at the man who had quietly decided to die for him, and had thought he had hidden it, and gave him the gift of being asked rather than commanded, which was the gift Harry gave to everyone he meant to keep. I promise I'll bring you in before the end, he said, which was not quite the promise Snape had asked for, and Snape heard the difference, and understood that the boy would walk into the dark on his own terms no matter who tried to stop him, and that the most a man who loved him could hope for was to be standing close enough to catch what fell. It was, Severus reflected bitterly, exactly the bargain he had made with Lily and lost. He resolved, this time, not to lose it. He did not yet know that the boy had resolved the same thing about him. The wrongness wore a turban, and Harry felt it before he understood it. It came off Professor Quirrell, the stammering defense teacher, and it was not the man's nervousness. Harry had spent 6 years reading dangerous adults, and Quirrell read wrong, like a voice coming from a place the body wasn't. The boy could not have said how he knew. He only knew that when Quirrell was near, the scar that the brother wand had given him ached faintly like a struck bell, and that the ache had a flavor he recognized from nowhere and yet recognized completely, the way you recognize a smell from before you had words. He took it to Draco and to Granger and to no adult at all, because he had learned that the adult's instinct was to manage children and that a managed child cannot move. The three of them watched and gathered, the way Narcissa had taught one of them, and the way the other two had simply always been, and over the term they assembled a shape, a thing hidden in the school that everyone called a third-floor corridor and no one explained, a great shaggy dog with 3 heads, a half-mad rumor about something Dumbledore had moved from Gringotts the very day someone had tried to rob a particular vault. A defense professor who flinched from garlic and never took off his turban, and who twice Harry caught looking at him with eyes that were not Quirrell's eyes at all. "It's him," Harry said finally on a gray afternoon by the lake to the 2 people he trusted with it. "It's not a metaphor and it's not a someday. He's here. He's in the school, wearing Quirrell, weak as a ghost but real, and he's after whatever's behind the dog on the 3rd floor, the thing Dumbledore moved from Gringotts. I'd put everything I have on it being a way back, a body, a return." He skipped a stone across the cold water. He came home quiet, exactly like I said he would, while everyone watched the front door for a dramatic return. He's been 3 corridors away from me for a whole term. And the grown-ups are going to handle it the grown-up way. Dumbledore's laid traps, I can feel them. The whole castle's a trap built around that thing, and they're going to let it play out as a test, probably of me, because that's what Dumbledore does. He builds lessons out of children. Well, I'm done being someone's lesson. "So what do we do?" said Draco. "Tell Dumbledore, tell Father, tell Snape." "No." Harry's voice was quiet and certain. "We don't hand it to any of them, because the second we do, it becomes their move, and we go back to being pieces. This is the first real chance we've had to play Draco, properly, against him directly on our own terms before he's strong. Think about what it means if 3 first-years take the Dark Lord's road home out from under him, while Dumbledore's still arranging his clever traps. It tells the whole board, the faithful, the ministry, Dumbledore, all of them, that there's a new power at this school, and it isn't on anyone's side. We don't beat him to save the day, we beat him to plant a flag." He looked at his brother and his friend. "But I'm not going to pretend it isn't dangerous. He's a shadow now, but he's still him, and people who get between him and what he wants tend to die. So I'm only asking once, and you can say no, and it changes nothing between us." "Are you with me, idiot?" said Draco. "Stop asking." "I've already worked out 3 ways past the dog," said Hermione Granger, who had decided some weeks ago that Harry Potter was the most interesting problem she had ever been assigned, and that she was not about to let him solve it without her. "Music puts it to sleep. Honestly, did neither of you read anything?" And Harry Potter laughed by a cold lake, with his brother on one side and a muggle-born girl on the other, 3 first-years against the darkest wizard of the age, and felt, for the first time since Ollivander's shop, not afraid of the thing that was coming, because he had stopped waiting for it and started walking toward it on his own 2 feet with the people he had chosen, which was, his mother would have told him, the only way a Potter ever did anything worth doing. What they did beneath the school that night is a story that took a different shape in every mouth that later told it, and Harry let it, because a story you do not control controls you, and he had learned to feed the legend exactly as much as suited him, and not 1 word more. The bones of it were these: that 3 first-years went through a door the whole staff believed sealed, that a girl's cleverness and a boy's loyalty and a 3rd boy's uncanny, untaught command of magic carried them past obstacle after obstacle that had been built to stop grown wizards. And that at the end of it Harry Potter stood alone before a mirror, with a thing wearing a teacher's face, and the shadow of the Dark Lord looked out of another man's eyes at the boy whose mother's love still burned in his skin, and found it could not take what it had come for, and could not touch the boy without burning, and fled, shrieking, diminished, denied, back into the dark to wait and gather and try again. He did not get the stone. That was the only fact that mattered, and Harry had made certain of it not by heroics but by arithmetic. He had reached the mirror first because he had planned better, and he had made sure that what the mirror could give could not be given to the thing in the turban, and he walked out of the dark beneath the school pale and shaking and entirely victorious, having denied the Dark Lord his road home, having met his enemy at 11 and sent him fleeing, having proved to the faithful, to Dumbledore, to his father, and to the shadow itself, that the boy who lived was not a symbol or a sword or a prize, but a player. And that the board the Dark Lord meant to come home to was no longer the one he had left. He woke in the hospital wing to Dumbledore sitting beside his bed, and the old man's eyes were not triumphant and not calculating, but simply finally careful with him. "You were not supposed to face him," Dumbledore said quietly. "I had built arrangements, protections. I had thought, if it came to it, to be there myself." "I know," said Harry. "I went anyway, not to beat your traps. To make sure it was mine this time. The first time he came for me, I was a baby and my mother stood between us, and it cost her everything. This time I stood between him and what he wanted, myself, on purpose, awake. I needed that. I needed the first move in this war to be one I chose." He met the old man's gaze, the swept gray calm. "You wanted to be there to save me. I understand it now better than I did in the spring. You're not a liar and you're not cruel. You're just a man who spent so long carrying everyone that you've forgotten people can carry themselves. But I don't need saving, Mr. Dumbledore. I never needed saving. I needed someone to stop deciding things for me. My mother gave me a choice when she died. Everyone since has tried to give me a destiny instead, you included. I went down there tonight to take the choice back, that's all. That's the whole war, really, when you boil it down, whether I get to choose." And Albus Dumbledore, who had come to the bedside half meaning to begin, gently, to draw the boy into the long plan after all, the prophecy, the bond, the terrible necessity he still believed in, looked at the child who had just walked into the dark and out again on his own terms, and closed his mouth and did not begin, because he understood at last that there was no version of the plan that this boy would accept being told. And that the only way to keep Harry Potter in the war was to let him fight it as a free man or not at all. "Then I will offer you what I offered in the spring," Dumbledore said, rising, and his voice was tired and humble in a way it had not been in 50 years. "Not a destiny, an ally when you want one, who has finally learned to ask rather than to use. I have spent a long life moving people toward what I believed was good. I begin to think I might have done more good in the end by trusting a few of them to find it themselves. You have taught an old man something tonight, Harry. I had not expected to still be teachable. Thank you for it. Rest now. Your mother," he paused at the door, "your mother would not have understood half of what you have become, but she would have known the half that matters has not changed at all. Good night." Lucius came to Hogwarts at the news of it, ostensibly as a governor, in truth as a father whose plan had just walked into the dark without asking him, and he found his sons in an empty classroom and shut the door. "You faced him," Lucius said. His voice was very controlled, which in Lucius meant fury. "The Dark Lord. You faced him at 11 beneath the school with a mudblood and a Weasley, and you did not tell me, and you did not tell Severus, and you denied him the thing he had returned for. Do you understand what you have done? When he is whole again, and he will remember that the boy who unmade him as an infant unmade his return as a child, and he will remember that the boy did it raised under my roof, with my name half on him. You have not made us his right hand. You have made us the family that thwarted him twice. You have ruined us, Harry. You have ruined this house's entire future on a child's adventure." "No," said Harry, and he did not raise his voice either. They were so alike in that, the two of them, that it was almost funny. "I've saved this house, Father. You've just been looking at the wrong future. Your plan was to hand me to him as a trophy and hope he was grateful. But you taught me to read people, and I've read him now. I stood close enough to feel his mind reaching for mine, and I'm telling you, the Dark Lord doesn't keep trophies and he isn't grateful. He'd have taken your gift and used me and discarded you the moment I'd served. Your plan didn't end with the Malfoys at his right hand. It ended with the Malfoys used up and thrown away like everyone he's ever called faithful. I've read what happened to the families who served him last time, so have you. You've just been hoping it would be different for you." Lucius said nothing because it was true, and he had been hoping exactly that, and he had never let himself say it aloud. "Here's the future I'm building instead," Harry went on. "When he comes back, he'll find that the children of his Death Eaters are mine, that the houses he counted on are watching to see which way I lean before they move, that the school he meant to terrorize has a power in it that isn't his and isn't Dumbledore's. He'll find the board flipped, and the person who flipped it owes nothing to anyone and can't be bought or frightened or used, which means, for the first time in his life, he'll face something he can't predict. That's not ruin, father. That's the only thing that's ever beaten him, and I'm it, and your house made me. And when this is over, the Malfoys won't be remembered as the family that knelt to a dark lord. We'll be remembered as the family that raised the only person who was never afraid of him. That's worth more than a seat at his right hand. It's worth more than anything you've ever owned. You just have to be brave enough to want it. He stepped closer to his father, and for a moment the boy and the man stood eye to eye, almost of a height now. Mother already chose this, years ago. She chose me over the plan, and she's never once looked back. I'm asking you to catch up to your own wife, father, because she's going to win this argument whether you join her or not. She always does. You taught me that too. And Lucius Malfoy looked at the son who was not his son, the prize who had refused to be a prize, the weapon that had become a man in his own house under his own roof, and felt the entire architecture of 20 years of ambition fall silently down inside him, and felt beneath the ruin something he had not expected and did not have a name for and would not have admitted to under torture. Pride. Cold, reluctant, astonished pride. He had set out to raise an instrument and had raised, instead, the most formidable person he had ever met, and the person was looking at him with his wife's certainty and his own cunning, and offering him a future better than the one he had schemed for, if only he were brave enough to take it. Your mother, Lucius said at last with difficulty, is an extraordinary woman, and I have never once won an argument with her, and I see no reason to expect that to change now that she has made an ally of you. He straightened his robes, reclaiming his dignity by inches. I will consider what you have said. I make no promises, but I will consider it. He moved to the door and paused and did not look back because there were some things a Malfoy could not say to a face. You faced him alone and you were not afraid. I find that I am glad you are mine, even if you were never mine to give away. Good night, Harry. And he went, and Draco let out a breath he had been holding for the entire conversation and said, That's the closest father has ever come to saying he loves someone. I've waited 11 years to hear it, and you got it in a term. But he was grinning because his brother had just turned their father halfway, and halfway was further than either of them had believed Lucius could be moved. Far to the north, in a fortress in a cold sea, a woman who had not seen sunlight in 10 years pressed her ruined face to the bars and laughed, because she had felt it too. They had all felt it, the faithful, the mark on every surviving arm warming for the first time in a decade, and Bellatrix Lestrange knew with the certainty of the truly mad that her master was stirring, that he had reached out and been thwarted but not destroyed, that he was gathering himself in the dark to come again. And she laughed in her cell at the thought of the world he would come home to, and did not know, could not have imagined in the narrow burning corridor of her devotion, that her own sister's adopted son had spent the year quietly dismantling the board her master meant to inherit, that the children of the faithful she dreamed of leading were slipping, one by one, into the keeping of a green-eyed boy who answered to no dark lord at all. She laughed, and the Dementors drifted closer to feed on the one joy left in her, and far to the south 2 brothers slept in a greenlit dungeon, having flipped, in a single year, more of the board than the grown players had managed in 10, and the war that everyone thought they understood went on quietly becoming a different war entirely, shaped by hands no one had thought to watch. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. Brothers, it took the Dark Lord 3 years to come back into a body, and he came back, as Harry had always said he would, quietly in the dark with no one watching the right door. The boys were 15 by then, and the board they had spent 4 years building had set hard. Half their generation answered to them now not by oath, which could be broken, but by the unbreakable thing that is loyalty freely given to people who saw you first. The block had a name no one had chosen and everyone used. The Eclipse, the houses and the children who stood in the shadow between the dark and the light and were owned by neither. Greengrass anchored it, not the younger had broken with his father over it. Zabini gave it his mother's wealth and his own cold counsel. And across the old divide, Weasleys and a muggle-born girl who was now the most brilliant witch in a century gave it the half no pureblood faction had ever had. It was not large. It did not need to be large. It needed only to be the thing that could not be predicted, and it was, and the 2 brothers at its center had become, by 15, a power that the grown players spoke of in lowered voices and did not know how to move against. So when the Dark Lord rose, he did not rise into the world he had left. He rose into Harry Potter's world, and he did not yet understand the difference, and that misunderstanding was the whole of the war Harry had been fighting since he was 10 years old on a windowsill by a green fire. The summons came to Malfoy Manor on the longest night of the year. The Dark Lord, newly embodied and gathering his old faithful, called a convocation of the pureblood houses, to take their measure, to renew their oaths, to remind a forgetful Britain who its master was. And Lucius Malfoy, who had spent 15 years dreaming of exactly this night, came to his sons with the old light in his eyes and the old plan on his lips, because some hopes do not die even when their owner has watched them proved hollow. He has asked for you, Lucius said, by name, the boy who unmade him, raised in a faithful house, he wishes to see you presented. Harry, this is the night I have prepared for your whole life. If you come to him and kneel and offer him your service, the service of the one person whose turning would tell all of Britain the war is already lost for the light, there is no honor he would not give this house. We would be first among the faithful, untouchable. Everything I have built would be, Father." Harry said it gently because he had grown over the years into a gentleness with Lucius that was almost unbearable to watch, the patience of a son with a parent he has long since outthought and never stopped loving. "Sit down. I'm going to tell you what's actually going to happen tonight, and then I'm going to ask you to stand with your wife and your sons instead of your dead plan, one last time, because after tonight there won't be a chance to choose again." Harry laid it out for them in the Green Fire study, the same room where Narcissa had heard Severus's confession 9 years before, and Lucius listened to his son the way a man listens to the sea decide to change course. "He thinks tonight is a coronation," Harry said. "He's going to stand up in the Lestrange Hall and have the houses renew their oaths, and the centerpiece is meant to be me, the boy who lived kneeling, proving the war's already won. That's the script. Father, you wrote half of it years ago and he's reading from the same page, and that's exactly why it's going to break, because everyone in that room will be expecting the script, and a script is just a plan everyone agrees to follow. The way you beat a script is you stop following it in front of an audience that can't look away. And if he kills you for it," Lucius said. "He is not a patient man, Harry, and you propose to humiliate him in his own faithful's hall. He will not stand there and be lectured." "He will raise his wand. He'll try to get into my head first," Harry said. "That's his instinct. He reads people before he kills them. He likes to know what he's destroying. He's the best legilimens alive, and he's going to reach into my mind in front of the whole hall certain, the way he's certain of everything, that he'll find a frightened child behind my eyes." The chessboard smile. "He's going to find a swept room and a locked door and nothing he can use, and it's going to unsettle him in front of an audience that has never once seen him unsettled, and that crack, that 1/2 second where the most frightening man in Britain looks confused, is worth more than any speech. Snape spent 4 years building me that door so Dumbledore couldn't read me. It turns out it was for this. Funny how things keep being for things you didn't know about when you built them." "And the curse," Lucius pressed, because he was a father and a strategist both, and the two were screaming at him. "When the speech lands, when the houses begin to waver, one of his faithful will not wait for his master's permission. Someone will try to put you down before you finish." "Yes," said Harry simply, "someone will. Which is why Draco's going to be exactly 1 step behind my left shoulder the whole time, and Severus is going to be against the east wall where he can see the room, and Greengrass and Knot are going to be where I've put them, and we are going to have wargamed every curse and every angle, because that's what we do, Father. We do the planning where the enemy can't see it and walk in already knowing how it ends. I'm not going to be brave tonight. Brave is what you call it afterward when you didn't plan. I'm going to be prepared. There's a difference, and it's the difference between my mother, who had no warning and had to be brave, and me, who has had 9 years to get ready and intends to use every one of them." He looked at his father. "But I need to know you're with us, not for the plan. The plan works whether you're in the room or not, for the family. Because when it's done, there's going to be a new Britain, and I'd rather you were standing in it as my father than watching it from the side as a man who bet on the wrong king one last time. Mother already chose, Draco already chose, Snape chose years ago. I'm asking you last, Father, because you're the hardest, and because you taught me that the hardest piece to turn is the one worth turning most." Lucius Malfoy looked at the boy he had not wanted, had tried to own, had meant to give away, and had ended by loving against every instinct of self-preservation he possessed. And he made at last, after 15 years, the only choice his wife had ever needed him to make. "I have spent my life," he said, "standing behind powerful men and hoping to be spared. I find I would rather, for once, stand behind one I am proud of. I am with you, Harry. Tell me where to stand, and I will stand there, and if anyone raises a wand at my son, I will remind the hall that a Malfoy was killing for sport before most of them were born." He almost smiled. "It will be a novel experience, defending the right thing. I am told it is habit-forming. Let us go and remake the world before I lose my nerve and become sensible again." The convocation was held in a hall that had belonged to the Lestranges, vast and cold and hung with the iconography of a creed that had murdered its way across Britain a generation before and meant to do it again. The houses came because they were afraid not to. They filled the long hall in their finery and their fear, the old families and the new frightened, and at the head of the hall on a black chair sat the thing that had come back from the dark. He was terrible to look at, and he meant to be. The years as a wraith had left their mark. The face was no longer a man's face. But the power was real and the room felt it, the weight of a will that had broken stronger people than anyone present, and when he spoke the hall went silent as held breath. "My friends," said Lord Voldemort, and his voice was soft and carried to every corner. "How you have prospered in my absence, how comfortable you have grown." The softness was worse than shouting. "I have been patient, I have been away. And I have returned to find my faithful fat and my enemies bold, and a generation of your children grown up calling themselves by a name I did not give them." His red eyes moved across the hall and found the 2 young men standing together near its center, unbowed, unafraid, and the whole room turned to look at what he looked at. The eclipse, how charming, how very charming that the children of my servants should play at being a power. I have called you all here tonight, my friends, to remind you that there is only one power in this country, and that the games of children end when the adults come home. Harry Potter, come forward, let me look at what Lucius Malfoy has so generously raised for me. Harry Potter walked forward through a hall of the most dangerous people in Britain, and he was not afraid, and the room could see he was not afraid, and that, more than anything he said, was the first crack in the night. Because everyone in that hall had come braced to watch the Dark Lord reclaim his nemesis, and instead they watched a 15-year-old boy walk up to the most feared wizard alive with the calm of a man arriving at a meeting he had called himself. "Hello, Tom," said Harry. The hall stopped breathing. No one had said that name aloud in 20 years. The red eyes flared. "I'll call you that," Harry went on pleasantly before the fury could land, "because everyone else in this room calls you a title you invented, and I think you should hear, just once on the night you came back, that there's at least one person in Britain who isn't afraid enough to use it. You asked to look at what Lucius Malfoy raised for you, so look. But I should warn you first, because I was raised to give my enemies fair notice. You're about to find out that the thing you came home to reclaim was never yours, and was never the light's either, and that you've walked into the one room in Britain where you are not actually in charge. I know that's hard to hear. Take a moment." What happened next took less than 10 minutes and remade the politics of magical Britain for a generation, and it happened almost entirely without a wand drawn, because Harry Potter had learned at 10 years old that the people who win are not the people with the most force, but the people who understand the room. He turned his back on Lord Voldemort, an insult so total that half the hall flinched, waiting for the boy to be struck dead, and he addressed the houses instead, the frightened lords and ladies in their finery, and he spoke to them not as a hero and not as a heretic, but as the one thing they could not dismiss. A player who held cards they had not known were in the deck. "You all came here tonight afraid," Harry said, and his voice filled the hall. "Afraid of him. Afraid of what happens to your houses if you don't kneel. I understand it. I was raised by people who knelt to him once and watched it cost them everything, so I know exactly what you're weighing. So let me make the arithmetic simpler than he wants it to be." He began to walk the hall unhurried, and the houses turned to follow him, which meant they had turned their attention from the throne, which was the entire trick. "Last time he promised you power and gave you a war you lost, and the families that served him hardest were the ones he spent first. The Lestranges look around, this is their hall, went to Azkaban for him while he went to Vapor. Ask Bellatrix when she gets out how the loyalty paid. He doesn't keep what serves him. He uses it up. Every single one of you knows a family that learned that the hard way. Most of you are related to one." The hall was silent, but it was a different silence now, the silence of people hearing aloud the thing they had all privately thought. "Now here's what's changed since last time," Harry said, "and it's the only thing that matters. Last time you had two choices, kneel to him or stand with Dumbledore in the light, who looked down on you, distrusted your houses, and would have happily seen the lot of you stripped of everything you've built over 1,000 years. Two bad options. Kneel to the man who will spend you, or beg from the people who despise you. That's the choice he wants you to think you still have." He stopped in the center of the hall, and his brother came and stood at his shoulder, and around the room, quietly, without drama, others rose, Greengrass and Knot and Zabini, and a dozen heads of houses who had been told this morning what tonight would hold, and stood, and the standing rippled outward, house after house declaring, simply by getting to their feet, that they were already his. There's a third option now. There's been a third option for 4 years, and most of your children are already in it, and you didn't notice because you were watching the wrong door. You don't have to kneel and you don't have to beg. You can stand with us. With the houses that owe nothing to the dark and nothing to the light, that protect their own, keep their wealth, hold their traditions, and answer to no master who'll spend them in a war. That's what the eclipse is. It's not a children's game. It's the thing every one of you has secretly wanted since the last war ended and was too frightened to build. We built it for you. It's already here. You only have to stand up. And they stood. Not all of them. Fear does not empty a room in a night, but enough, more than enough, house after house rising to their feet in the Lestrange hall, until the standing was a majority and the kneeling was a frightened few, and Lord Voldemort sat on his black chair and watched the country he had come home to rule choose in front of him in his own faithful's hall, a third thing he had never imagined and could not kill fast enough to stop. "You see," Harry said, turning back to the throne at last, "this is the part you never understood, Tom. You think power is fear. It's a reasonable mistake. Fear works for a while. But fear is a tax, and people will always, eventually, pay anyone who offers to lower it. You ruled by being the most frightening thing in the room. I won by being the thing that made people less afraid. You can kill me tonight. You're welcome to try. My mother's still in my skin, and the last wraith that tried it ran, but it changes nothing now because I'm not the point. The board's the point, and the board has already moved, and it moved while you were a vapor and your faithful were getting comfortable, and everyone was watching for your dramatic return instead of watching two boys by a green fire. You didn't come home to your kingdom, Tom. You came home to mine. I just wanted to be the one to tell. It happened exactly as Harry had said it would, which was its own kind of terrifying to the people who had helped him plan it. The Dark Lord's mind came for his first. Harry felt it the instant before it struck, a pressure behind the eyes, the cold reaching attention he had felt across a hospital wing 4 years before and recognized now like an old enemy's footstep. Voldemort reached into the boy's mind in front of the entire hall, certain of what he would find, and Harry gave him the swept gray room, the bare floor, the locked door, 9 years of a fortress first built in a cupboard against Vernon Dursley and finished in a dungeon under Severus Snape's exacting hand. The most accomplished legilimens in the world pressed against the mind of a 15-year-old and found nothing, no fear to seize, no secret to turn, no purchase at all, and for 1/2 second in front of the houses who had never seen it, surprise crossed the ruined face of Lord Voldemort. The hall saw it, that was the point. The hall saw their master falter, and a thing that has never faltered cannot afford to be seen doing it once. And then, exactly as Harry had said, someone did not wait for permission. It was Rookwood, a faithful of the old school, who had seen the crack in the wavering houses and understood with a fanatic's clarity that the boy had to die now this second before the speech could finish its work. His wand came up from the third row and the curse left it green and screaming, the killing curse, aimed at the back of Harry's unprotected head, and the hall gasped as one body. It never landed. 3 things happened in the half-second the curse took to cross the hall, and all 3 had been rehearsed in a green fire study until they were reflex. Draco, 1 step behind his brother's left shoulder exactly as planned, was already moving not in front of Harry, because a body cannot outrun a curse, but sideways, his own wand flicking a heavy silver candlestand off its base and into the curse's path, where the green light struck metal and burst harmlessly in a shower of sparks. Severus, against the east wall with the whole room in his sight, had Rookwood disarmed and bound before the sparks had died. And Harry himself had not so much as flinched, had not turned, had simply continued facing the houses as though a man trying to murder him from behind were a minor interruption beneath his notice, which was the most frightening thing of all, more frightening than the curse. A boy so prepared that an attempt on his life did not break his sentence. "Thank you, Mr. Rookwood," Harry said, into the ringing silence, still without turning around. "I was hoping someone would do that. Now everyone in this hall has seen the difference between the 2 ways of doing this. A nod back toward the throne, rules by being the thing you're afraid of. I just stood here while a man tried to kill me, and I wasn't afraid because I have people at my back who love me, and that's a kind of safety he has never once been able to offer any of you, because you cannot buy it and you cannot frighten it into being. You can only earn it. I earned mine. Look at it. That's the whole argument. A boy who can't be made afraid, standing in a room full of people who have been afraid their entire lives. Which of us would you rather be? Which of us would you rather your children be?" He let it hang. "You already know. Most of your children already chose. Stand up and join them." It was Dumbledore's hour too, and Dumbledore had come uninvited, alone, an old lion walking into the den of the people who hated him most, because his spies had told him what tonight was, and he had meant to make his own last play for the boy. He stood now at the back of the Lestrange Hall in his Stormcloud robes, and he had come prepared to fight for Harry Potter, to reveal himself, to offer the light's full protection, to make it last the case he had been building for 15 years. And he watched, instead, a 15-year-old do, in 10 minutes, what Albus Dumbledore had failed to do in a lifetime. He watched the boy take a hall full of frightened purebloods away from Voldemort not by force and not by fear, but by offering them a way to be safe that did not require them to be anyone's weapon, which was, Dumbledore understood with the vertigo of a man watching his entire philosophy refuted by a child, exactly the thing Dumbledore himself had never once offered anyone in his long career of moving people toward the good. When it was over, when Voldemort had risen from the black chair in a fury that found nothing to strike, when the Dark Lord had screamed his promises of vengeance into a hall that had already, quietly stopped being his and swept out into the night with a frightened handful at his heels to begin a war he had already half lost, Dumbledore came to the boy. The hall was emptying around them, houses leaving in 2s and 3s, the new order of things settling over Britain like snow. "I came," Dumbledore said, "to save you. Again, I have spent 15 years coming to save you in one form or another, and I have just watched you make every rescue I ever planned irrelevant." He looked very old and very tired, and underneath, strangely at peace. "I owe you an apology I have owed for a long time, and I will make it properly now, while I have the courage. I built my whole strategy on a prophecy that said you must face him. I read it as a sentence that you were the weapon fate had forged, and my task was to keep the weapon sharp and aim it true. I hid you in a cupboard for it. I let you suffer for it. And I was wrong, Harry, not about the prophecy, but about what it meant. It never said you had to be a weapon. It said you had the power to defeat him. And tonight I finally saw what that power is, and it is not the power I spent my life preparing. It is not a curse or a sacrifice or a blade. It is that you make people unafraid. That is the power he knows not. I read the prophecy for 50 years and I never understood it until a 15-year-old showed me in a murderer's hall that the thing that defeats fear is not a stronger fear. It is a choice. You have given a whole frightened country a choice. I never did that, not once. I only ever gave them a side. You're giving yourself a hard time, said Harry, not unkindly. You held the line for 50 years so there'd still be a country left for me to do this in. That's not nothing. That's most of it, actually. I got to be the one who makes people unafraid because you spent your whole life being the one who kept the lights on long enough for me to grow up. I'm not interested in your apology, Mr. Dumbledore. I'm interested in your help. The war's not over. He's wounded, not dead, and a wounded animal that size is the most dangerous thing there is. I'm going to need the order. I'm going to need you, not as my handler, as my ally. The offer you made me in the hospital wing when I was 11, I'm taking it now. Are you still good for it? And Albus Dumbledore, who had come to the Lestrange Hall to claim a weapon and found a man offering him a partnership, felt something he had not felt in 50 years of carrying the world alone, relief. The relief of being asked to set part of the weight down. I am still good for it, he said, and his eyes were bright. I am at your service, Harry Potter. God help me, after a lifetime of moving the pieces, I find there is no work I would rather do than stand at the shoulder of someone better at it than I ever was. Tell me where you need me. Lucius Malfoy had watched the whole of it from beside his wife, and he had not said a word, and when it was over he understood that he had just witnessed the death of every plan he had made in 20 years and the birth of something far greater than any of them, and that his son had built it, and that he had very nearly stood in its way. You knew, he said to Narcissa low, as the hall emptied around them. All of it. You have known for years exactly what they were building. I have known since he was 10, said Narcissa, watching her two sons stand together in the center of the slowly emptying hall, Dumbledore at one side now and Greengrass at the other, the new powers of Britain arranging themselves around the boys she had raised. I knew the night Dumbledore came to the manor, and Harry told the most powerful wizard in Britain that he was no one's weapon. I have spent every year since making sure they had the room to build it, and shielding them from you when I had to, and from the dark, and from the old man, and from the whole world that wanted to make them into pieces. It is the only thing I have ever done that I am entirely proud of, Lucius. I found a starving child in a cupboard, and I did not make him a weapon. I made him free, and free, he has just done what no weapon ever could. Lucius was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, with the particular difficulty of a proud man conceding the central argument of his life, I wanted to give him to a dark lord as a trophy. You wanted to give him himself. I have spent 15 years certain I was the strategist in this marriage. He watched his sons. I was a fool, Narcissa. A clever, careful, lifelong fool, and you were right in a cupboard in Surrey before I had even met him, and you have been right every day since, and I am, he stopped and started again because the words did not come easily to Malfoy. I am grateful that you did not let me ruin it, that you saved the boy from his rescuers as thoroughly as you saved him from his jailers, including from me. You are not a fool, Lucius, she said, and took his arm because he was still her husband, and she had not stopped loving the cold, clever man under the ambition. You are simply a man who learned, too late but not entirely too late, that the most valuable thing in the world is the one thing you cannot own. It is the lesson the boy taught all of us in the end, even him, even the old man, even me. She looked at her sons. Come. Our family is waiting, and it is larger than it was, and I will not have us standing apart from it on the night they won. Before the family gathered, Harry found Severus alone on the manor's east terrace, where the man had gone to be away from the noise of a victory he did not know how to stand inside. You stopped pretending tonight, Harry said, coming to stand beside him at the balustrade. In the hall, you bound Rookwood in front of everyone. The Dark's faithful saw it. There's no double game left after that. They all know now whose side you're on. There is no double game left, Severus agreed. The cold air had stripped the last of the careful nothing from his face. I have spent 11 years balanced in a gap, telling two masters two stories and surviving in the dark between them. Tonight the gap closed in front of the entire pureblood establishment, with my wand pointed at a man who would have killed you. I am, as of tonight, a marked traitor to the Dark Lord with no cover and no story left to tell. He looked out at the dark grounds. I find I do not mind. I have been afraid of that gap closing for 11 years, and now that it has, the thing I feel is not fear, it is relief. I had forgotten a man could choose a side and simply stand on it, in the open. I had forgotten what it weighed the other way. You chose my mother's side, Harry said quietly. A long time ago, you never left it. You just spent 11 years defending her from inside the camp of the people who killed her, which is the loneliest place a person can stand, and you stood there for me and you thought I didn't know. You knew. It was not a question. I've always known. I let you keep the secret because it was the only safe thing you had, and I wasn't going to be the one who took it. Harry turned to face him. You called my best potion adequate for 4 years, Severus. I want you to know I heard the other word inside it every single time. I knew what you were doing. You were the surprise nobody was supposed to see coming, and you spent my whole childhood quietly keeping me alive, and tonight you stepped out of the shadow and put yourself between me and the killing curse in front of the people who will hunt you for it. So I'm going to say the thing neither of us has ever said once, and then we never have to say it again, and you can go back to calling my work adequate." He held the man's gaze. "Thank you for her and for me, and for 11 years of standing in the loneliest place there is. You didn't fail her, Severus. You saved her son. You can put it down now." And Severus Snape, who had not let anyone see his face break since the night Lily Evans died, turned it to the dark grounds so that the boy would not have to watch, and the boy, who understood, looked out at the same dark beside him and said nothing more, and let the man have it, because that was what you did for the people who had quietly decided to die for you, and Harry Potter had learned from a woman in a cupboard 9 years before. Exactly how to give someone the dignity of being undone without an audience. They stood together on the cold terrace, the spy and the boy he had saved, until Severus had rebuilt his face, and then they went into the warmth and the noise and the family, side by side, and never spoke of it again, and never had to. The family that gathered at Malfoy Manor that longest night was not the family Lucius had married into, and was infinitely better. Andromeda was there and Ted beside her, a muggle born at a Malfoy hearth and no one's eyebrow raised, Nymphadora and Auror now, her hair gone celebratory pink, teaching a delighted Hermione Granger to change her own nose. Severus stood by the green fire that still burned the color of Lily's eyes, and he was not hiding his face anymore, because the gap he had feared his whole life had closed at last, and he had been standing when it closed, exactly where he had always meant to stand, on the boy's side of it in the open, alive, which was more than he had ever let himself hope for. The Weasleys had been invited, all of them, and had come, and the sight of Molly Weasley and Narcissa Malfoy finding, over a teapot, that they had raised their children to the same fierce loving standard by entirely opposite roads, was a thing the old pureblood Briton would have called impossible, and the new one would simply call Tuesday. And in the middle of all of it, the two brothers stood together by the window, looking out at the dark grounds where they had once cut their thumbs behind a yew hedge and made up their own words because the old ones did not fit. "We did it," Draco said. He sounded slightly amazed still, even now. "We actually took the board from all of them, Father and Dumbledore and the Dark Lord, all in one night. I keep waiting to find out it was a dream, and I'm going to wake up at 6 years old, still an only child, still certain I was the cleverest person in the world." "You were never the cleverest person in the world," said Harry. "You were something better. You were the first person who ever stood at my back." He looked at his brother, the spoiled, frightened, fierce little boy who had bloodied his knuckles for a stranger at 6 and never once wavered in 9 years, who had chosen Harry over his father in a room full of witnesses and been bored doing it, who was the single reason a boy from a cupboard had grown into a man who could empty a Dark Lord's hall. "I told you that first year. I said I couldn't take the board alone, but I could take it with you. I wasn't being kind, it was arithmetic. Everything I am, I'm only half of, you're the other half, you always were. Tom never understood it. He died alone the first time and he'll die alone the next, because he never had a brother, and a man with a brother is doing different arithmetic than a man without one. That's the whole secret. That's the thing none of them ever saw. They kept trying to win me or break me or aim me, and the answer was always just us, two of us, standing at each other's backs. Nobody can move a piece that's already part of something bigger than the board." Draco was quiet for a moment, looking out at the dark. The war was not over, they both knew it. Voldemort was wounded and gathering and would come again, and there would be years of it yet, and blood and nights far worse than this one. But the shape of it was theirs now. The board had been remade. Whatever came next, it would come at people who stood together into a country that had been given a choice, against a darkness that had returned to find its kingdom already gone. "Brothers, then," Draco said, and held out his hand, palm up, the old offer, the one that was never a grab, the offer Harry had taught him on a windowsill by the same green fire, a lifetime and 4 years ago. "Brothers," Harry agreed and took it, "even when one of us is winning." Behind them, the rebuilt family laughed and argued and lived. The green fire burned the color of a dead woman's eyes who had bought her son a choice instead of a destiny. And the longest night turned, somewhere past midnight, toward the dawn, and two boys who had remade a war that everyone thought they understood stood together at a window with their whole dangerous future ahead of them, and were not afraid of any of it because they had each other, and that in the end had been the only move that mattered. Chapter 7 End.